session and do the necessary reminding members to ensure all devices are switched off, function and F8, declaring any relevant financial or other interest in relation to today's business. And we have the apology from Gordon Dunn, not aware of any others. We have the minutes of the 1st of March in the table pack. Members agree that those are an accurate record of the meeting. Okay. Thank you. And then we move into the inquiry itself into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. And the Minister will be joining us now. Could I refer members to the following documents that you have? You have the Clerk's memo, which is at page 9. You have the guidance regarding evidence under oath affirmation at page 10. The Minister's invitation, which states the reason for inviting the Minister to return, is at page 13. A copy of the Hansard of Dominic Walsh's briefing on the 28th of January is at page 15. And then a copy of the Hansard of the Minister's briefing on the 21st of May is at page 40. Could I remind members that the committee agreed to bring forward previous declarations of interest with respect to the inquiry. However, if there are any new declarations that need to be made, these should be articulated. And could I welcome the Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure to the committee this morning. If you wish to make any declarations of any financial or other interest with respect to the inquiry yourself at this point? No. Okay. And do you wish to proceed under oath or affirmation? Under oath. Okay. Could I remind the Minister that she has been requested to give evidence under oath and or affirmation, and she has chosen under oath. And inform the committee that we wrote to the Minister point 33, page 13, inviting her to return to give evidence. Included in this invitation was information on the potential legal implications of giving evidence under oath that she knows to be false, and that she may wish to take her own legal advice on this issue. Could I highlight to members also that the Minister was invited to return to provide clarification on whether or not she was aware that emergency exiting plans with respect to proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. In the Minister's evidence to the committee on the 21st of May 15, the Minister indicated that she was not aware that emergency exiting was an issue of concern. In his evidence to the committee on the 20th of January 16, Mr Dominic Walsh, former chairperson of Sport NI, indicated that at a meeting in mid-2012, he told the Minister of concerns around emergency exiting with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium, and was assured that these were being dealt with. The committee also wishes to seek clarification from the Minister regarding whether or not she was aware of plans around the possibility of purchasing houses adjacent to the proposed redevelopment of Casement Park Stadium. In his evidence to the committee on the 28th of January, Mr Walsh stated indicated that the purchase of houses as a solution to the emergency exiting issue was discussed at the meeting in 2012. Could I highlight then that the Minister was notified in advance of the committee's reasons for taking evidence under oath, of the potential implications of knowingly making a false statement whilst under oath, and that they may wish to seek their own legal advice. The Minister was notified in advance of the evidence session of the matters on which evidence is to be sought. The Minister was provided in advance of the evidence session with relevant evidence received from other parties, i.e. Mr Walsh. The Minister will be provided with a reasonable opportunity to put forward the facts as she understands them, or to correct or contradict other statements on relevant matters which have been made in evidence to the committee. Questioning of the Minister should remain focused on the matters notified to the witness in advance of the meeting. And could I now invite the Clerk to provide the wording and of the oath and the Bible to the Minister.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be truthful and honest, and that I will give the committee all such information and assistance as I can to enable it to discharge its responsibilities. Thank you.
If you would like now to proceed with your opening statement, please.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Before I make my statement to the committee, I would like to start by saying that, as members will be aware, no witness has given evidence on oath to the committee during the course of this inquiry, and it is a matter of concern to me that there now should be an alteration in procedure, particularly at this late stage. I am happy to give evidence to the committee and have indicated publicly, and I am very happy to give further evidence again today. I am very concerned that at such a late stage in procedure may give rise to a well-founded concern about the fairness of the committee's conduct. Not only is singling out a few witnesses to give evidence under oath intrinsically unfair and questions the integrity of some of the witnesses, it also disrupts the effectiveness of the inquiry, not least because the committee will also be placed in the impossible position of evaluating the value of some evidence under oath and weighing this against the evidence of other witnesses that has not been given under oath. I am mostly concerned that there is now, at the very least, an inescapable appearance of bias in the chairmanship of the committee, given 1, the active consideration been given to singling out the testimony of certain witnesses for evidence under oath, and 2, the chair's previous role and obvious conflicts of interest in relation to this inquiry arising from his role as Minister in the initiation of the Regional Stadia Programme. Good administration demands fairness and consistency of treatment, and I will invite the committee to act fairly and consistently by choosing either that all witnesses be called or recalled to give evidence under oath, or that no witnesses should be called or recalled to give evidence under oath. Now that I have commented on the proceedings, I make my statement. I very much welcome the opportunity to personally respond to the allegations made by the former Chair of Sport NI, Mr Dominic Walsh, during his evidence to the committee on the 20th of January 2016. I also welcome the opportunity to publicly state my commitment to successfully delivering the Executive's Regional Stadia Programme and, within that programme, to completing the redevelopment of Casement Park. I think it is worth pointing out what has already been achieved with regard to the programme to date. Kingspan Stadium has been completed and is operating successfully, praised by both home and abroad visiting rugby fans as a world-class rugby stadium. Windsor Park is moving very well and has successfully already hosted international matches despite some challenges along the way. I am confident that with the rebuilding of the West Stand, which will be complete before the end of this year, and last by no means least, the project development of Casement Park is making good progress and moving forward again. I once again welcome the opportunity to repeat that I am absolutely committed to delivering a safe stadium at Casement Park, and I once again repeat my earlier sentiment that safety is of paramount importance to me personally, to my department and to the Ulster Council of the GAA. I note from the recent media coverage that some members of the committee say that the committee is in a quandary as a result of some of the contradictory evidence that they have heard to date. I very much welcome, therefore, the opportunity to set the record straight on a number of factual matters and to very clearly and conclusively demonstrate that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to substantiate this committee that I was made aware of any concerns regarding safety at Casement Park prior to the 30th of April 2015. The evidence I will present to the committee will once and for all conclude rational debate on this matter and will also enable attention to be directed towards the realisation of all of the very real and substantial benefits that Regional Stadia Programme and within it the Casement Park project offer to all the people of the north of Ireland. It is essential that everyone involved in the project is able to get on with the job in hand to ensure that we deliver on the promise of social and economic benefits that are available and achievable with the delivery of a safe and sustainable stadium at Casement Park. This project will undoubtedly help put the North on the map, not just in terms of the contribution that it will make to putting forward a successful and very important Rugby World Cup bid, but also to the longer-term benefits to be gained in terms of delivering social economic employment, increased visitor numbers and enhanced prosperity across West Belfast. To date, the committee has heard evidence that supports my stated position from a wide variety of witnesses, from the GAA, the Casement Park project team, the Casement Park design team, Ulster Rugby, the Irish Football Association, the Department of Culture and Leisure also. I want to take this opportunity to remind the committee of those who have appeared: Mr Tom Daly, Mr Porrick Duffy, Dr Danny Murphy, Mr Owen McCluskey, Mr Mike Trice, Mr Kieran McGurk, Mr Carl Southern, Mr Peter May, Mr Rory Muskelly, Mr Andrew Dadley, Mr Edgar Jardine, Mrs Rosalie Flanagan, Mrs Cynthia Smith, Mr Noel Malloy, Sir Nigel Hamilton, Mr James Shaw and myself on a couple of occasions. No less than 17 individual witnesses have given clear and unequivocal evidence to this committee which directly supports my position. None of these people stated that or referred to evidence that significant concerns about safety had been highlighted prior to the 30th of April 2015. In addition to this, we have the Project Assessment Review Report produced by an independent team led by the British Cabinet Office Major Reports Authority and published on the 7th of August 2015, alongside a number of written responses and clarifications to various queries provided to the committee from David Blackall, the independent British Cabinet Office Chair of the Power Team. The evidence of these witnesses and Project Assessment Review Team is unequivocal that Casement Park is achievable. I am amazed and aghast that despite the clear weight of evidence provided by such a broad range of individuals and organisations, an improper inference that witnesses may have misremembered or misrepresented the facts and misled the committee in any way in relation to Casement Park project is now been given any kind of credence. Are people really promoting some kind of bizarre conspiracy theory which stretches from the GAA to the British Cabinet Office? I intend to present evidence today by firstly responding to the allegations made by Mr Dominic Walsh, the former chair of Sport NI, in his evidence session to the committee on the 20th of January 2016. Then I will focus on the factual evidence I referred to earlier before refocusing on some important issues of assurance and project governance that I feel have been overlooked in recent months. I then propose to end by highlighting some items of contradictory evidence that have been previously presented to this committee. But first of all, I want to address the evidence presented by Mr Walsh. The first allegation that he made was that, unlike other witnesses, he was not given access to relevant papers by the department to support his presentation. At the outset, I would like to clarify that DCAL did not withhold any information from Mr Walsh prior to his appearance. Indeed, the department did not receive a request from Mr Walsh. Following a request from the committee clerk, DCAL officials contacted Mr Walsh on the 5th of August 2015 to advise that members wished to call him to provide an oral briefing on his role in the Casement Park project during his time as Chair of Sport NI. Mr Walsh subsequently contacted the department seeking a meeting with the Permanent Secretary to discuss the committee's inquiry, what was being sought of him, and to determine what support DCAL could provide to him. At no point, and I stress this, at no point did Mr Walsh ask for or request sight of documentation. In fact, only following Mr Walsh's evidence did he decide to write to DCAL on the 23rd of February 2016 seeking specific information. Indeed, when Mr Walsh approached the department, he stated that given the time that had elapsed since he had held the position of Chair of Sport NI, he felt he was not in a position to brief the committee and wanted to meet with someone from the department first. In effect, he was seeking DCAL advice about how to provide evidence. This is a strange position to take. On one hand, Mr Walsh felt able to make a series of claims at this committee, but on the other hand wanted departmental officials to interpret what the committee was seeking on his behalf. In response to this request for a meeting, it was made clear to Mr Walsh that such a meeting would not be appropriate. It is clearly not for departmental officials to second-guess the committee's intentions with regard to the inquiry or to provide any clarification in relation to what the committee might be seeking. It was important that the department ensured that there would be no conflict of interest, and also very important to avoid any actual or indeed perceived contamination of the inquiry process or witness evidence. The decision not to meet Mr Walsh was communicated to Mr Walsh and to the committee clerk, and an email outlining the position was sent to the committee clerk on the 5th of August 2015. The department did not receive any further correspondence from Mr Walsh, nor did he request any access to any papers or documentation until the 23rd of February, as I've already stated. In terms of support, Mr Walsh, as a former chair of Sport NI, would and could at any time have contacted his former organisation to request any assistance he may have needed, including documentation, and I am not aware if he did so prior to his appearance. With regard to the provision of papers to other witnesses, I am aware that approaches were made to the department by former DCAL officials who explicitly sought sight of documentation they were familiar with and would have had access to in the course of their duties relating to Casement Park project and in advance of their appearances before the committee. These were facilitated by officials fully in line with normal practice, both here and in other jurisdictions. However, DCAL officials did not meet with these former employees to interpret the needs of the committee with regard to the inquiry, as has been requested by Mr Walsh. The second allegation by Mr Walsh was that DCAL officials were aware of the issues around emergency exiting and the need to purchase and demolish houses as far back as the summer of 2012. This allegation is absolutely absurd. As I have stated before, there is nothing in all of the evidence I have referred to which supports the allegation that discussions involved the raising of concerns to officials which were then passed on to me. Nothing whatsoever. But let's dig a little deeper into what Mr Walsh is saying. He is saying that discussions around emergency exiting existed somehow constitute concerns being raised and ignored. Think about the implications of what this means, not just for this project, but for governance and projects right across government. Is Mr Walsh saying that it is inappropriate for a project to consider risks from the outset? Is Mr Walsh saying that no project should have a risk register or formal risk evaluation processes? Is Mr Walsh saying that project and programme teams should not discuss options to deal with risks? Or is Mr Walsh saying that any and every discussion about how to manage risks constitutes concerns being raised and ignored? This goes against all evidence and guidance and best practice about good programme and project management. It goes against all the principles of good communication and, taken to its extreme, such an approach could, frankly, in my opinion, be dangerous. Turning risk management into something to fear because it will later be twisted into allegations discourages open and frank communications about options. Importantly, the evidence just didn't stack up. Mr Walsh referred to discussions about the need to buy and demolish houses as far back as the summer of 2012. If this did happen then, those involved in these discussions are to be commended because they must have had a crystal ball. The design team for the project was not formally appointed until the 3rd of September 2012, which is after the summer of 2012. There would not have been any design information or any detailed design sketches available for discussion prior to the appointment of the design team. I understand that designs were first considered by the Safety Technical Group the following year on the 11th of February 2013. So, with no design team, no design and no opportunity for a rational, fact-based discussion, The allegation was that concerns were raised at that time. Any discussions could at best have been matters of uninformed speculation, which is not the basis for managing a major project. As previously stated, I was not aware of allegations in relation to concerns around emergency exiting at Casement Park prior to Mr Scott's appearance at this committee on the 30th of April 2015. I have made this very clear in my evidence at the committee meeting on the 21st of May 2015 and indeed on many other occasions since then. I stand by this statement, and I will come back to this point and prove further evidence which confirms these concerns were not raised with me before this time. The third allegation made by Mr Walsh was that he had attended regular meetings with me during 2012 to discuss a range of issues, including issues about stadia programmes. He alleged that at one of these meetings in the summer of 2012, the issue of emergency exiting for the proposed Casement Park Stadium was discussed along with the purchase and demolition of houses to facilitate emergency exiting. Again, this is utterly absurd, not at least because I have stated that the design team for the project was not formally appointed until the 3rd of September 2012, which is again after the summer, and therefore I repeat again, there would not have been any design information or detailed design sketches available for discussion about purchase, demolition or any other aspect of exiting in absence of a design. In a 9-month period from January to September 2012, Mr Walsh alleged that he had regular Friday meetings with myself and the Permanent Secretary. To quote Mr Walsh, "As time progressed, the meetings became more frequent. In the absence of the Chief Executive, who was off ill at the time, it was absorbing more of my time. There was the Friday meeting. This is how I would describe it." Mr Walsh went on to state that it became a regular Friday meeting with the Minister and Permanent Secretary. If not every week, it was more frequent. I can confirm to the committee that during this period we had 3 meetings, Wednesday meetings, not Friday meetings, and these were on Wednesday the 15th of February 2012, which was a follow-up meeting to discuss Sport NI's 2012-2013 business plan with myself, Dominic Walsh, Eamon McCartan, Rosalie Flanagan and Mick Corrie. Again on Wednesday the 20th of March 2012, which was a 15-minute pre-meeting attended by myself and Dominic Walsh ahead of a meeting with Sport NI board members, and again on Wednesday the 2nd of May 2012, which was a 15-minute pre-meeting attended by myself, Dominic Walsh, Rosalie Flanagan and Colin Watson ahead of a meeting with Sport NI board members. As Mr Walsh indicated in his evidence session, no minutes were taken at these meetings, and a search of the department's records management system has revealed no records exist. Informal notes may have been taken by officials present, but if so, these have not been retained within my department. As Chair of Sport NI, Mr Walsh will have attended events and functions during 2012 at which I may have been present. For example, events such as part of the build-up to the Olympic and Paralympic pre-games training camps. I do not, however, consider these to be regular meetings, and in addition, none of these meetings occurred on a Friday, nor do I recall ever discussing issues around the regional stadia programme at these events or functions. Now that I feel I have clarified this position regarding Mr Walsh's allegations, I would like to take members back to the inception of the regional stadia programme, and in particular the facts surrounding the Casement Park project from its commencement in terms of the concept right up to date. I will do so in an effort to provide you with tangible evidence on a number of matters, something which has been sadly missing from some of the other witnesses' evidence to this inquiry to date. I will focus on the governance and assurance mechanisms which are built into each and every stage of the programme and projects later in my evidence. I welcome the opportunity to put the record straight on a number of issues about Casement Park project and the processes associated with it, to very clearly demonstrate that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the claim that I was ever made aware of serious safety concerns in Casement Park prior to the 30th of April 2015, or in fact that such a claim is ever raised or elevated through the formal project and programme structures that are in place. The proposal for a multi-sports stadium was first raised by Sport NI in the early 1990s, and following publication of the Taylor Report, which was commissioned following the Hillsborough disaster in 1989. This report made a series of recommendations for bringing public stadia here and in Britain up to modern safety standards. The Taylor Report resulted in a new generation of safe and comfortable stadia being developed across Britain. The new facilities saw increased revenues and improved sustainability of grounds and clubs. It was the growth of these stadia together with the shortcomings of the existing stadia in the north that prompted the public debate as to the benefits of a multi-sport stadium suitable for hosting major fixtures of the main spectator sports, including soccer, rugby and Gaelic football. In 1999, a pre-feasibility study on the sports stadia project was commissioned by Sport NI. This study concluded that there was potential for demand for a 30,000 seated stadium supporting up to 30 sporting and other events per annum. However, the report also concluded that such a stadium would be unlikely to generate sufficient revenues to contribute to the capital cost of its construction. Therefore, further consideration was given to alternative forms of financing and a project which could produce private sector innovation and commercial acumen to the project. In 2004, Direct Rule Ministers commissioned a feasibility study into the development of a multi-sports regional stadium for the North, playing host to major fixtures within all three major sports, as well as a range of other events such as concerts and conferences. In November 27, a business case was produced which identified a multi-sport stadium at the former Mays Long Cache prison site as its preferred option. This business case also considered the option to refurbish and enhance existing stadia with a proposed capacity of 39,000 for the Casement Park Stadium. There is a reference in Appendix B of the document entitled Sport NI Existing Facilities Paper, which states that the report was updated and agreed by Mr Scott from Sport NI with absolutely no reference whatsoever to any safety concerns or indeed any issues regarding 39,000 capacity proposed for the Casement Park project. I quote from the document: "This paper is an update of a report prepared by Sport NI's Facilities Management Manager reference SC 03158 in April 2003, and it has been prepared with his assistance. It identifies potential improvement works which would typically be undertaken to each of the existing stadia in order to comply with health and safety and sports grounds legislation, bring them up to basic but a functional standard, and make significant enhancements which would increase both the quality and capacity of the grounds." The paper goes on to state that in relation to Casement Park, the proposed works would increase the quality and capacity of the stadia to include 39,000 capacity. In January 2009, the then Minister of Culture, Arts and Leisure, Mr Gregory Campbell, indicated that a multi-sport stadium would not be developed at the Mays Long Cache site. As a consequence of this decision, the three governing bodies of the sports involved, the IFA, the GAA and indeed Ulster Rugby, were asked to bring forward preferred alternatives on stadium provision. In order to provide appropriate strategic direction for taking forward regional stadia development, the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure established an oversight steering group comprised of senior representatives of the Department, Sport NI, the Strategic Investment Board and latterly the Department of Social Development and Belfast City Council. In March 2009, the governing bodies for football, Gaelic games and rugby presented proposals for the redevelopment of their respective stadia provision, namely Windsor Park, Casement Park and Ravenhill, which is now Kingspan. I refer to the Casement Park Multi-Agency Response Plan, which was developed in April 2009 and refers to within the GAA evidence to this committee. That this document was developed in consultation with the PSNI, the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service, the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service, Belfast City Council and the GAA. This multi-agency response plan provides the generic framework for responding to a major incident at Casement Park, and Mr Scott was consulted on this document. The plan addresses joint coordination and communications provisions whilst clarifying the roles and responsibilities of key agencies. Potential incidents looked at the following, and I quote: collapse of buildings and stands, fire within stands, clubs and changing areas, crowd crushing and panic, chemical gas and incidents, terrorist incidents, unquote. It is interesting to note that in the event of an evacuation, it was agreed that the GAA stewards will marshal the crowd leaving the grounds in a countrywards direction on the Andersonstown Road and move them as far as possible towards the Andersonstown Leisure Centre. In October 2009, Sport NI, on behalf of the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure, commissioned FGS McClure Waters to develop an outline business case examining options for the development of regional stadia in the north of Ireland for soccer, rugby and Gaelic games. In February 2010, you, Chair, as the then Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, provided a briefing in relation to progress on regional stadia developments to the CAL Committee. You advised the committee then, and I quote, "It was the GAA's view that a major stadium is one that has the capacity of 40 to 60,000, end quote. You further advised in your briefing that, and again I quote, "It is anticipated that the proposal will address the physical inadequacies around health and safety requirement, and also that the stadium could be used for other non-GAA events, such as concerts, which would consequently add to sustainability of the stadium," end quote. In July 2010, Sport NI submitted the outline business case for the development of regional stadia to the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure for approval. The business case considered a number of options for delivery and identified a preferred option for each stadium, which included a 40,000 capacity stadium for Casement Park. In this cover letter, the then Chief Executive, Mr Eamon McCartan, stated that he was, and I quote, "content that the preferred options within the business case addresses the strategic needs of each of the three sports within both a viable and sustainable business model, and was satisfied with the information contained within the business case, and that it represents value for money." He also gave assurance that, and I quote, "the business case was prepared to HM Treasury Greenbrook standards with continual review by the Oversight Steering Group, whose membership included Mr Harkness from Sport NI, and had received all requisite approvals from Sport NI staff, including Mr Scott. It is worth stressing that Sport NI did not raise any concerns regarding the 40,000 capacity stadium proposed for Casement Park. It should also be noted that the purpose of an OBC is to assess the project and the site, the feasibility of the project and site, and also to assess the risks and weigh the risks against the benefits to inform the investment decision. On the 15th of September 2010, you, Chair, as the then Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, wrote to Barry McElduff in his capacity as the then Chair of this committee and provided a briefing paper regarding the regional stadia development. It is worth pointing out to you, Chair, that you confirmed to the committee that the outline business case consultants, and I quote, "considered the governing body proposals in relation to best practice in terms of health and safety at sporting venues." In the briefing paper, you also advised the committee that to provide appropriate strategic direction for taking forward regional stadia development, DCAL had established an oversight steering group comprised of senior representatives of the Department, Sport NI, SIB and latterly the Department of Social Development and Belfast Council. Your paper concluded that, and again I quote, The regional stadium provision for each of the sports which included the redevelopment of Casement Park to a maximum spectator capacity of 40,000, were judged to be the optimal options, consistent with the need to ensure viability and long-term sustainability and having regard to the diverse needs of each of the sports. You, nor anyone else, highlighted any concerns whatsoever about the Casement Park project or proposed capacity at that time. I should also point out that for the avoidance of doubt, that neither Sport NI nor anyone else from the organisation raised issues regarding safety of the proposed 40,000 capacity. On the 30th of September 2010, Mr Nick Harkness from Sport NI, when given evidence, advised that the CAL Committee that Sport NI had been through a number of drafts of the OBC. The first draft of the OBC was submitted to Sport NI in November 2009, the second in December and the third in February 2010. In June 2010, a final draft was submitted to Sport NI. Therefore, the OBC had been through a number of iterations where it was sent to Sport NI, thus providing them with umpteen opportunities to raise any concerns, but none were raised. On submission of the OBC, further information was sought and the Department asked Sport NI to clarify some issues with the governing bodies, which they did. Since the final draft was submitted, responses to those queries were submitted to the Department. However, crucially, at this very important junction, once again I draw your attention to the fact that no issues about safety were raised by Sport NI at this crucial stage. In October 2010, the OBC for the regional stadium development was submitted to DFP for approval. The Permanent Secretary of DCAL at that time, Mrs Rosalie Flanagan, sent a letter to DFP advising you, Chair, as the then Minister, had approved the OBC for the regional stadium programme, which included the redevelopment of Casement Park with the capacity of 40,000. Once again, I remind everyone that the OBC that you, Chair, approved and signed off confirms that the site is capable of hosting 40,000 people. In March 2011, DFP formally approved the OBC, which identified the proposal to redevelop and upgrade Windsor Park with a capacity of 18,000, Ravenhill with a capacity of 15,000 and Casement Park with options for a capacity of up to 42,000, with the preferred option of 40,000 identified as a most economically advantageous option for the stadium development. Mr Walsh, in his recent evidence, indicated that there were capacity issues raised at OBC stage. However, there have been no mention of this contained in either Sport NI submission of the OBC or in your approval, Chair, of the OBC when you were the Minister responsible for the programme and its constituent projects, including Casement Park. The OBC proposed a 40,000 capacity stadium at Casement Park and no issues were raised in relation to capacity or safety in this document. The document has a section which focuses on risks and indeed outlines a number of high-level risks. However, and more importantly, no safety risks are mentioned. During design development and community consultation, capacity was subsequently reduced to 38,000 by the GAA. On the 16th of June 2011, Mr Harkness from Sport NI stated at the CAL Committee meeting that Sport NI had delivered 9 separate training workshops, including risk management, and had established draft risk registers for each project. He further advised that Sport NI had contributed to the DCAL Stadium Programme Board Risk Register. Once again, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that no issues about safety were raised by Sport NI at this or any of the risk registers I have mentioned that Sport NI provided to or inputted to. In October 2011, in line with good practice for capital investments, on the scale of the Regional Stadium Programme, my department commissioned a Gateway Zero review aimed at ensuring that the programme and its constituent projects achieved the desired outcomes. The Gateway Review, which is an independent review, by a team of OGC Cabinet Office approved experts led by Chris Dye, a respected and experienced review team leader. The review covered 5 main areas, including risk management as part of the review process. The review team spoke with Sport NI representatives, including Mr Hartness, and it is worthy to note that no concerns in terms of safety or emergency exiting were highlighted to the review team. The review resulted in a number of recommendations being made to ensure the successful delivery of the programme. One key aspect of the recommendations was the need to bring the projects together into a coherent project structure and recommended the appointment of a single programme director. Following a recruitment process in conjunction with the Strategic Investment Board, in March 2012, Mr Noel Malloy was appointed as a programme director for the Regional Stadia programme. In 2012, the Safety Technical Group was established by Sport NI at the request of DCAL. The Safety Technical Group is a multi-agency body established to provide specialist advice, and I emphasise the term advice, to the stadium delivery team regarding health and safety aspects of the design for the stadium projects in Ravenhill, Windsor Park and Casement Park. In February 2012, the following approval of the Ulster Council GAA Business Plan by the Sport NI Programme Board on the 10th of November 2011, Sport NI issued a development cost letter of offer to the GAA for £4.3 million to fund project development costs relating to the potential construction of a 40,000 capacity all-seater stadium at Casement Park project, subject to the normal terms and conditions associated with this grant funding. It should be noted, however, there were absolutely no terms and conditions whatsoever cited in relation to safety. So let me ask members, why would Sport NI, an organisation chaired by Mr Walsh at the time, issue a letter of offer if they had any concerns about spectator safety without including specific terms and conditions relating to this? The development cost letter of offer was signed by Mr Hartness, the Director of Participation in Sport NI. The technical and risk assurance role in the initial oversight group was performed by Mr Scott. The oversight group, with Mr Scott's technical input, had the opportunity to comment on all aspects of safety at sports grounds, including emergency exiting at the early stage and during the due diligence technical review of the OBC. Any perceived risks at feasibility stage would have informed the OBC. In fact, it would have had a major impact on viability. Surely, therefore, had any concerns about safety been firmly raised at that time by Mr Scott, Mr Hartness should have been made aware of them. Should this have been the case, why was the development cost letter of offer issued and a letter of offer with no specific conditions relating to health and safety? The only rational conclusion is that no such concerns have been raised. I should also point out that Mr Hartness also attended 14 of the 20 sponsor board meetings held up to the 30th of April 2015, and never at any time did Mr Hartness or any other Sport NI representative who attended other sponsor board meetings ever express any concerns about spectator safety relating to the Casement Park project, which I find frankly astonishing. If there were indeed any concerns expressed from within the team for which he is directly responsible. In March 2012, in line with the recommendations of the Gateway Zero review, following a subsequent recruitment process in conjunction with the SIB, Mr Noel Malloy was appointed as Stadium Programme Director. In April 2012, in line with the recommendations of the Gateway Zero review, I examined alternative delivery arrangements for the Regional Stadia programme and concluded that new delivery arrangements for the Stadia programme should be introduced. One key element of this involved bringing the Stadia programme in-house into the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure. Responsibility for the delivery transferred to the department in April 2012, with the DCAL Stadium branch being established following formal transfer of Sport NI Stadia team to the department. In December 2014, the full business case for Casson Park was approved by DCAL. On the 30th of April 2015, Mr Scott, Chair of the Safety Technical Group, made allegations about the Casson Park project. In June 2015, following evidence given by the Chair of the Safety Technical Group to the committee, and in line with good practice and programme management practices, I commissioned an independent project assessment review by the British Cabinet Office's Major Project Authority, and committed to implement any learning points and recommendations which may be made, and also to publish the report. On the 7th of August 2015, I established the independent Project Assess Review report into the Regional Stadia programme. The report made 20 recommendations, and I am committed to ensuring that all recommendations will be implemented in full. I think that it is highly important and significant to remember that the Project Assessment Review report concluded that the aim of constructing and operating a strategic regional stadium for the GAA in Ulster was achievable on the Casson Park site. The review also found that many aspects of the programme had gone very well, with the Kingspan Stadium successfully completed and the Windsor Park project making very good progress also. The team acknowledged that there were some general weaknesses and challenges within the programme, but importantly concluded that a regional stadium at Casson Park was achievable. I have very publicly committed to ensuring that all 20 recommendations contained within the PAR report would be fully implemented. An action plan has been developed to oversee and implement, with most of the recommendations expected to be implemented in full by 2016. I am pleased to report that to date, given 11 recommendations have been fully implemented, with significant progress been made against all the remaining actions. The key recommendations from the PAR report have already been implemented include: a dedicated programme senior responsible owner has been appointed, and Ian May took up his post in September 2015. Donny McSorley has now been appointed as a new independent chair of the STG, with the first meeting of the newly constituted STG being held on the 26th of November 2015. Monthly meetings of the Safety Technical Group have now been scheduled, and it has now met on 3 occasions and also held a workshop focused on the Casson Park project. The Sports Ground Safety Authority has joined the Safety Technical Group in an advisory capacity. This is the same SGSA who gave evidence to this committee on the 3rd of December 2015. And I quote, "The following, we hope you will be involved. We hope to be involved in the Reformed Safety Technical Group, and I wish to add value to the process as it moves on from this point. So it is not necessarily about looking at the history, but more at the future." And they also quoted, "They are keen to work and engage and add whatever value and experience they have to help move the process on." And also, there has perhaps been some misinterpretation of the wording, because having seen some of the reports of the CAL meetings, they said they were conscious that differences in phrasing and differences and in different documents had caused some confusion amongst members. The Safety Technical Group has just returned from an extremely valuable visit to the Midlands area of England. The trip encompassed non-match day visits to 4 major sporting arenas, all of which were distinct in terms of spectator movement. The trip included information sessions with the safety officers from the respective venues, who provided the group with tours of the stadia and briefed STG members on the operations of the venues, including normal ingress and egress, traffic management around the venues, and a series of risk-based scenarios, including time calculation, movement, and the role and operation of the emergency services on match days. In addition to this, the evening match experience was particularly useful because Villa Park is heavily dependent upon traffic regulation orders to manage the area outside the venue. the group were given the opportunity to view the system in operation as patrons arrived. The STG PSNI representative on the trip also had the opportunity to engage with the police at Villa Park, and other members were provided with opportunities to spend time in the control room at the venue and also at various other locations throughout the venue. Overall, the trip provided an extremely valuable learning experience, which I'm sure will assist the STG in their deliberations going forward and will be particularly relevant to the Casement Park project. The visit has also helped us with the implementation of PAR recommendations, particularly in relation to building experience and capacity, sharing knowledge and best practice, and also learning how certified authorities, police forces and sports grounds owners have worked together to address challenges in sports ground safety. The GAA have now appointed Rory Muskelly as their project leader and also appointed 2 independent members to their board. The GAA are continuing to work with their project team to progress towards submitting a new planning application in the 3rd quarter of 2016, and in advance of this, to commence community cohesion this month. As I've said, the STG is now reformed under a new chair, Danny McSorley, and is providing advice on the new proposals for the redevelopment of Casement Park. The Safety Technical Group has been significantly strengthened by the addition of the Sports Ground Safety Authority in their capacity as advisor to the group, and I very much welcome their involvement and undoubted expertise they bring to the group's work. The GA team has presented a general outline of its approaches to the new design to the STG group. The Safety Technical Group has taken a proactive and innovative approach to identify the most effective format to address its assessment work. I understand that a workshop was held recently to consider some of the issues around Casement Park, and it proved to be extremely effective, with all parties cooperating well in an examination of key issues. I am delighted to report that there has been excellent progress across a range of fronts in terms of implementing the PAR recommendations. I wish to bring your attention to the project governance, assurance and risk management processes associated with the programme, as I feel it is important to highlight that throughout the programme, from April 2011 to April 2015, there was never any risk relative to safety at Casement Park highlighted at any level. For a long time now, the committee has been presented with personal opinion and often unsubstantiated comments. Important points have been skipped over, best practice and good work carried out on the regional stadium programme and its projects ignored, and the assurance approval and initial project viability processes conveniently forgotten. Some of the technical experts employed to deliver the stadium programme by DCAL and the GAA in recent years have given evidence during the course of this inquiry. These people are acknowledged and recognised as some of the best in their respective professions, both here and in Britain and abroad. Indeed, this has been acknowledged by the committee, and those individuals are bound by their respective professional codes of practice and professional ethics, and have been meticulous in the common purpose of delivery of the regional stadium programme. Their evidence is crucial to this inquiry. The committee must remember that this programme and its constituent projects were deemed viable at every stage of scrutiny. Therefore, in this part of my evidence, I will endeavour to link some of the important parts of earlier evidence to the overarching governance, assurance, risk management and reporting mechanisms that have in the past and continue to support the viability and delivery of Casement Park. To reinforce an important point, the Stadia programme was set up in line with the Office of Government Commerce to Achieving Excellence in Construction Guidance and the Cabinet Office's Managing Successful Programmes and Projects Guidance. During the evidence, the GAA and DCAL Stadia teams described this framework in detail, the various stage boundaries or gates that projects must undergo within the framework. How the consideration of safety technical matters was built in at every stage boundary, and how the DCAL funding agreement and the GEA contract documentation provided robust mitigation and protection measures around safety technical issues. These facts remain and are undisputed. I'm not going to go over previous evidence to this in detail because I believe that it is clear and it's factual and sets out the scene very clearly. It is also a matter of public record on Hansard. However, it is important to review the various stages of the boundaries of the programme, particularly where it would have been not only appropriate but an imperative to raise any serious safety concerns, and the importance of this cannot be underestimated. The reality is that no project in the programme could move from one stage to the next until it had satisfied all of the conditions pertaining to the particular stage. This follows the Cabinet Office's best practice for managing successful programmes and projects guidance. The purpose of each and every sign-off was to review and assure the continued viability of the project and to ensure the ability of the proposed facility to achieve safety certification. In other words, if a stage was signed off, the proposed project was deemed both safe and viable, so there has been no evidence presented to the contrary. I won't labour on the various stages of approvals that the project went through as I evidenced them earlier. However, I will highlight that there has been a lack of safety risks raised at each of the key project approval stages. No spectator safety or existing risks were identified by the 2009 Oversight Group or in 2010 at OBC stage. The purpose of an OBC is to establish the preferred option for any particular project. The OBC guidance describes the preferred option as the option that is best balanced in costs and in relation to the benefits and risks. Earlier evidence to the committee refers to the OBC guidance in which decision makers must ask whether any of the options are clearly too risky. This is clearly a fundamental question, and it must therefore be remembered that at OBC stage proposal, which was still for 40,000-seater stadium, if deemed to be too risky, the 40,000 capacity option should have been ruled out at OBC stage, and as you know, Chair, because you approved the OBC, this was not ruled out. It was approved and deemed feasible and signed off by yourself, with no mention or reference to any concerns about safety by anyone. After the OBC and as the development of the project progressed, project viability is examined again in more detail. This is at the point which risks should have been identified, addressed and eliminated or managed through advanced feasibility studies or mitigated by including appropriate conditions within the letters of offer. During this period, no issues or risks were raised in relation to safety or emergency exiting by Sport NI or anyone else. The development cost letter was issued on the 8th of February 2012 by Sport NI with no conditions relating to safety whatsoever. As the project was progressed through the design, development and consultation stage, the proposed capacity for Casement Park was reduced to 38,000 by the GAA project team. Following 9 months of design development, the project was ready for plan submission in June 2013. The integrated consultancy team signed off on the safety of the project for the planning submission and in doing so provided assurance that all safety requirements have been met. The STG signed off the planning drawings on the 19th of June 2013, and this was referred to in an email from the Chair of the Safety Technical Group of the 19th of June 2013 and subsequent STG Group's report on Casement Park. Indeed, the email I refer to here was from Mr Scott to the DCAL Stady Architect, and I quote directly from it. The STG is waiting some further information revisions to the internal specification dimensions from the design team. However, these would appear to be of a minor nature and will be reviewed accordingly. In the interim, the STG considered that there is the potential for an S factor of 1 and a P factor of 1 to be applied subject to any revisions to the proposals being agreed, and a suitable management plan for the venue being developed. Again, no risks or issues were raised in relation to safety or emergency exit at planning submission stage. The GA submitted the planning application on the 19th of June 2013, having received the relevant assurances from ICT and STG. Additionally, my funding agreement with the Ulster Council for the GAA for Caseman Park also allows for protections, and that there are several conditions built into this agreement to protect the investment at each and every stage of the process in terms of the delivery of the project. Again, risks are again dealt with in greater detail at the full business case stage 4. As mentioned earlier, the full business case was signed off by the DCAL Programme Board in December 2013. At this stage of the project, we're still going through the planning process, and the STG were continuing to work in collaboration with the design team, having issued a further report in October 2013. The issue of safety does not loom large in the decision of Mr Justice Horner, which quashed the granting of planning permissions on other grounds. Much has been evidenced regarding the international reputation of the appointed architectural practice Populous. Again, the relevance of this appointment and added assurances also provides both to the GAA and DCAL cannot and should not be underestimated. Populous has designed and delivered safe stadia all over the world. Their credentials have been evidenced and acknowledged by many, including the SGSA at the CAL Committee meeting of the 3rd of December 2015, and I quote, that the SGSA as an organisation have enormous respect for Populous architects. In fact, one of Mike's colleagues sits on the British Standards Institution Committee, and they acknowledge that their track record is excellent, it is very, very good, and that Populous is a very good architect, and it has dealt with very innovative designs around the world and some very elaborate and futuristic types of design. In addition to Populous, the economic operator Matt MacDonald were responsible for writing HM Treasury guidance around optimum bias and risks in relation to capital projects. This is, by any reckoning, a very strong combination of professionals to lead on the integrated consultancy team design stage. DCAL had no concerns regarding the assurance measures provided by the integrated consultancy team. And furthermore, the Ministerial Group for Architecture and the Built Environment endorsed the exceptional level of engagement on the Caseman Park project during the design development right through to planning submission. The Casement and Windsor Park projects were used as a pilot to inform the development of the DOE's Planning Future Community Consultation and Engagements Policy process. Having reviewed the key assurances milestones within the project, that there were no safety concerns raised at any stages of these key milestones, I will now highlight some of the governance, risk and management processes that existed throughout the programme and project hierarchy. The organisational structure established in support of the delivery of the Regional Stadia programme was set up using the Office of Governance, Commerce and Cabinet Office's best practice guidance. There was a formal hierarchy for programme and project governance developed for the 3 stadia projects, including Project Steering Group, in which each project has a steering group which meets at a minimum monthly and more frequently if required. The purpose of the steering group is to oversee the successful delivery of the project. The Caseman Park steering group is made up of representatives from the GAA, DCAL and the Department of Finance and Personnel's Central Procurement Directorate, and interim county board of the GAA is chaired by the GAA. The project risk registers are presented and discussed at every project steering group meeting. Project board meetings. There are 3 individual projects under the Regional Stadia programme that had their own project boards. Within these boards, there were internal structures for decision making, reporting and the escalation of risks and issues of importance. There was individual project risk registers prepared for each project, which were presented to the respective programme or project boards. the Stadia Programme Board. There is a Stadia Programme Board which meets monthly. This board consists of the programme senior responsible owner, the Stadia Programme Director, the DCAL Directors of Sport, Finance and Capital, amongst others. There are 2 independent external members on this board to provide a challenge role in the support of the SRO. The 3 sporting bodies project sponsors are in attendance at the start of the meetings to provide individual project updates. They have also the opportunity to table particular items of concern at the start of each meeting. The purpose of this board is to provide assurance to the programme's SRO on decisions appropriate to the programme board and to enable the programme senior responsible owner to make recommendations to the departmental accounting officer as required. There is a programme risk register presented and discussed at each programme board meeting. The Stadia Sponsor Board is chaired by myself as Minister. The Sponsor Board has an assurance function and is responsible for high-level strategic issues and provides both a support and challenge function to the programme SRO. The board consists of the Minister, the programme SRO, a representative from the GAA, a representative from the IFA, a representative from Ulster Rugby. Additional attendees of the board consist of senior DCAL officials, Sport NI senior representatives, SIB chief executive, other representative from the sporting bodies as and when required. The programme SRO presents an update report covering each of the projects at these meetings. In addition to this, Board Assurance, Sport NI and DCAL Sports Branch also hold quarterly assurance meetings as well as biannual reviews. So far into the programme, there have been 20 sponsored board meetings from December 2011 and March 2015. I have chaired 13 meetings. The DCAL Permanent Secretary has attended 15 meetings. Sport NI has attended 17 meetings, 3 by Dominic Walsh, 14 by Nick Harkness and 2 by Antoinette McKeown. This governance structure, again in line with the Office of Governance Commerce guidelines, has provided and continues to provide robust assurance to the Regional Stadia Programme and its constituent projects. Most notably, it provides a structured approach for the recording, reporting and elevation of risks and issues with formal routes for action upon elevation. As you would expect, Sport NI has had an establishment process for risk management. The Sport NI Risk Register identifies risks and the controls being implemented and proposed actions to manage such risks. The Risk Register identifies controlled risks and key risks, and it identifies areas requiring specific attention. Sport NI have a risk policy whereby it is an obligation for internal managers, one of which is Mr Scott, to provide operational risk registers in respect of their areas of responsibility on a monthly basis, which then is fed up into Sport NI's corporate risk register via their line management channels. The corporate risk register is then reviewed and ratified by an internal audit and risk management committee. The Sport NI has held risk management workshops to review risk management, and there appears to have been a concerted effort to improve the organisation's focus on risk management following the governance review in 2012. However, Mr Scott, through this very structured process, had ample opportunity to raise any concerns, yet this was not the case. The approved risk register is then presented to the Sport NI board for, and I quote, assurance and to draw attention to high priority risks. Risk review was a standing item on the Sport NI board agenda. Mr Harkness was then acting into the position of Chief Executive, and latterly Ms Antoinette McKeown, as a newly appointed Chief Executive, included a risk statement with every risk register presented to the Sport NI board since August 2012. The following are extracts from the risk statement. Risk management is a cornerstone of effective governance. Sport NI recognises that effective risk management is an integral part of the organisation's activities to ensure the successful delivery of its services, We will involve and empower all of our staff in the identification and management of both risks and opportunity within the system. Our risk system management will be driven by all staff members who will in turn provide the driving force to deliver our vision. And Sport and I will seek to ensure that DCAL and other key stakeholders are informed in a timely manner of key risks and the success of mitigating strategies. It is very, very clear, and it sets the scene from how risk should be managed and reported within Sport and I. As part of this process, I asked DCAL officials to review all of the Sport and I risk registers from October 2011 to April 2015. Risks are grouped under the headings of strategic risks, operational risks, reporting risks and complying risks, with intermittent management action plans noted. In addition, there was a section on non-significant risks and a section on key risks to Sport and I listed under a separate controlled risks section. There are risks mentioned such as budget underspend, ineffective management of capital budgets, delivery on time, ineffective governance, all with appropriate ownership and actions. From October 2011 to April 2015, there was absolutely no reference whatsoever made in relation to emergency exiting or any other safety concerns pertaining to Caisson Park on the Sport NI registers. As Sport NI were the overseeing body and had the chair of the STG as an employee within this organisation, if any risks were presented and highlighted, they should have surely been reported to the Sport NI risk registers. However, this was not the case. The only reference made about the Caisson Park project was in January 2015 under the heading of strategic risks was damage to relationships with key stakeholders. Obviously, this risk has nothing to do with safety. This risk was removed from the register the following month at the request of the Sport NI board, chaired by Mr Brian Henning at the time, and stated that this was not considered to be a risk to Sport NI. Throughout this time, we know that emergency exiting was being discussed at a technical level by the STG. That is evidenced by the STG's notes and the STG group reports that were being produced at the time. And as I stated earlier, we would all expect this type of conversation to be happening at this stage of design development. These are the types of project issues that are debated and resolved throughout any design development by all of the relevant professional and technical experts involved. However, if there was a serious concern, it certainly was not formally elevated in or by Sport NI, as evidenced by the lack of any mention in subsequent risk registers or on the quarterly assurance statements. I do not believe that a serious concern ever existed. The quarterly assurance that I've just mentioned is a very important management process and fundamental in this assurance review. Sport NI, as an arm's length body of DCAL, must provide quarterly assurance statements to the department for review as part of the quarterly accountability process. Quarterly assurance statements are, and I quote from the document itself, designed to document the system of internal control and governance to manage risk to a reasonable level within Sport NI. The assurance statement is approved by Sport Northern Ireland's Audit and Risk Management Committee. It is signed off by the accounting officer as part of his or her responsibility for safeguarding public funds and approved by the Sport NI board before issuing to DCAL. Contained within the quarterly assurance statement, there is a section on risk management. Within this risk management section, managers are obliged to report on any issues or risks that they have within their areas of responsibility. The quarterly assurance statement would have provided Mr Scott with an ideal opportunity to record his concerns pertaining to safety. However, at no stage were any concerns regarding safety or emergency exiting included in the Sport NI quarterly assurance statements. In fact, There was a quarterly assurance statement prepared for the period of April to June 2013, which would have provided Mr Scott with a perfect opportunity to highlight safety concerns prior to the submission of planning permission. My officials have reviewed the quarterly assurance statement for this time frame, signed off by the then accounting officer, Mr Harkness, and again, there is no mention whatsoever of Mr Scott's safety concerns. For the same period, I had my officials re-examine the risks presented at the sponsored board meetings, the board which I chair and which was attended by the Chief Executive of Sport NI, the Chief Executive of SIB and the DCAL Permanent Secretary. Again, there were no risks in relation to emergency accident reported in this forum. In February 2014, the SRO for the programme noted that the Safety Technical Group and the GAA were developing an emergency evacuation plan for Casson Park, and it stated that the constructive approach to resolving this issue is welcomed. This work was collaborative and remained collaborative, as stated in the further SRO update reports to the sponsor board meetings throughout 2014 and 2015. In preparation of this emergency evacuation plan was not reported as a risk or concern in the meetings that followed. Indeed, this collaborative approach is reflected in the Sport NI letter of the 17th of February 2014. The letter contains suggested design changes to achieve the emergency exiting capacity as Sport NI continue to assist in seeking to find solutions. The letter again confirms that Sport NI offers its ongoing support for the development of a new stadium at Casson Park. So, if Mr Scott said there was a risk, who did he say it to? If he reported it up the line to his management and Sport NI, where did it go to? If it was not on the operational risk register in Sport NI, it was not on the Sport NI corporate risk register, it was not reported at the Regional Stadia Programme Board, it was not reported at the Regional Stadia Sponsor Board by any of the Sport NI attendees or anyone else for that matter. It was not reported at the quarterly assurance meetings between Sport NI and DCAL. It was not reflected in correspondence from Sport NI to DCAL, and it was not reported at any meeting between me and Sport NI officials. So to conclude on this element, we have had the assurance that a global management, engineering and development consultancy of Martin MacDonald. We've had the assurance from a world-class stadia designer, Mike Trice of Papolis, who are a global collective of architects, designers, technical experts and industry veterans, and Mike Trice himself, who has an extensive expertise in a range of sports and leisure projects. We have had the technical assurance through the Safety Technical Group. We have had the assurance of a feasibility programme supported by the 2009 Steering Group input in the document entitled Sport NI Exiting Facilities Paper, and subsequently passed at OBC stage by the then Minister for DCAL. Again, absolutely no reference whatsoever to any safety concerns or any issues relating to the 39,000 capacity proposed for the Casson Park project. We had the assurance of the issue of a departmental cost letter of offer from Sport NI, signed by Mr Harkness, which had no mention of any safety-related conditions. We had the Safety Technical Group and the Integrated Consultancy Team design sign-off at subsequent planning stage. We had full case approval. We have had ongoing Safety Technical Group reports. We've had ongoing senior responsible updates, reports to the sponsor board. We've had risk assessment and assurance mechanisms built in at every level throughout the project reporting hierarchy. We've had the SGSA's acknowledgement at the recent CAL committee that it is not necessarily about looking at history but more at the future, and that they are keen to work, engage and add whatever value and experience they have to help them move the process on. And finally, we have the Cabinet Office's Major Projects Authority led by the Power Team, which clearly states Casson Park is achievable. In light of this, there was still no evidence of any red flag being raised on safety grounds for the Casson Park project. This suggests that spectator safety and emergency exiting was not, in fact, registered as a risk. It is suggested that this was a normal but complicated project issue that was under control, being managed appropriately within the project by the professional and technical experts employed to do so. Of course there were discussions and of course there were debates. That goes with the territory of developing and delivering a major project. But for that to be somehow twisted into ignoring concerns is misleading, it is inaccurate, and in the final analysis damages our collective capacity to take forward major projects. I once again want to confirm for the record, under oath, that the first I was made aware of any alleged safety serious concerns was when they were raised by Mr Scott at the CAL Committee meeting on the 30th of April 2015. And before I finish, I want to highlight just some specific instances where the committee mentioned there has been some contradictory evidence given to this inquiry. I should point out that this appears to be in the main contradicting Mr Scott's evidence, and indeed his evidence statements have also been contradicted by some of his own colleagues. During his evidence to the CAL Committee on the 30th of April 2015, Mr Scott made a reference to a Hillsborough-type disaster. To quote Mr Scott directly, he told the committee that while I accept that the probability of an incident together with a full capacity attendance at Casson Park is low, should such an incident occur, the potential consequences for spectator safety is huge, and any responsible person with an open mind to the issue would see them. I say that in light of the present Hillsborough inquiry." Unquote. This was contradicted in evidence provided by Ms Valerie Brown from Belfast City Council, Mr Mike Trice from Populous, Mr Oran McCluskey from Heron Buckingham Joint Venture, DCAL officials, the Cabinet Office Power Report, and his own colleague from Sport NI, Mr Andrew Sloan. In the evidence provided by Mr Sloan, he stated that, quote, "Essentially, you could build a stadium for 38,000 people in this case, but when it comes to Belfast City Council certifying that the stadium is the safety and the capacity, that a number could be much, much lower. You could end up with a stadium, and I use this just by way of example, with a 38,000 capacity, but only 15,000 would ever be allowed to be in that stadium." Unquote. In other words, Mr Sloan was stating that Belfast City Council would not issue a safety certificate for 38,000 if the stadium wasn't safe. The reference by Mr Walsh in his evidence to the committee on the 20th of January 2016 that he had attended meetings with me and raised issues around exiting, along with the purchase and demolition of houses to facilitate emergency exiting, is utterly absurd. Not at least because, as I have stated, the design team for the project was not formally appointed until the 3rd of September 2012. Therefore, I repeat, there would not have been any design information or detailed design sketches available for discussions about the purchase, demolition or any other aspect of exiting in absence of any design. The reference by Mr Scott in his evidence to the committee on the 9th of July 2015 that he had been advised by a senior GAA official that the design team, the GAA and DCAL, had access to high-ranking police officers and that they would be able to get the police report changed, referring to the PSNI report regarding emergency safety, was indeed refuted by Chief Inspector McNally of the PSNI, who was sitting beside Mr Scott at the CAL Committee meeting at the time. Chief Inspector McNally advised the committee that during his conversations with the GAA, and I quote, "There was never any effort to put pressure on the police to change the report. He confirmed that there were meetings to clarify the purpose or understanding of the police role, but there was certainly no pressure for the police to change the report." To close, I think it is worth reminding members that the Regional Stadium Programme is a key capital programme for DCAL and an executive priority and a key commitment in the programme for government. Indeed, it was you, Chair, who first brought the Regional Stadia programme to the Executive and gained executive agreement to deliver the programme of the 3 stadia at Kingspan, Windsor Park and Casement Park. The OBC for the Regional Stadia programme was in fact approved by you, Chair, on the 21st of October 2010 for a 40,000-seater stadium at Casement Park. Also, all 3 stadia will have education and heritage centres that will provide opportunities for schools, visitors and everyone to learn about the history and background to each of the sports in a creative way that will stimulate young people's minds and promote the STEM agenda while also increasing visitor numbers to venues across the north. It is important to remember that the Regional Stadia programme has delivered a very successful project with the completion of the Kingspan Stadium, and it is close to doing so at Windsor Park, where the reconstruction of the West Stand is due to be completed before the end of 2016. Both projects have both delivered and will continue to deliver social and economic benefits across the north. When the Executive, through my department, invested in the redevelopment of the Kingspan Stadium, we were confident that it would be a place capable of hosting showcase and showpiece events. The decision to have the Pro 12 final at Kingspan in May 2015 is an endorsement of that. Kingspan Stadium will also play a pivotal role in the Women's World Cup in 2017. And as members will be aware, the Irish Rugby Football Union intend to bid to host the Rugby World Cup tournament in 2023, and that the decision is fully supported by the Executive and the Irish Government. Both Casement Park and Kingspan Stadium are listed as potential venues. It is recognised that a fully redeveloped Casement Park has a critical role to play in the delivery of a successful bid by the IRFU for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. It is therefore essential that we all play our part to ensure that the potential can be realised and that the North is once again put on the map as a place capable of hosting such events. I'd like to take this opportunity to quote a number of very relevant, pertinent points from the SGSA's evidence to this committee on the 3rd of December. There has been perhaps some misinterpretation of the wording because it is seen in some of the reports at CAL meetings that they were conscious of differences in phrasing in different documents, and this had caused some confusion. The fact that the Green Guide, which is 220 pages long, cannot cover every eventuality. It was written in 2008, so the preparatory work for writing it was probably done around 2006, and things have moved on. Every bit of evidence written in the Green Guide, and particularly in section 1.7 in the 5th edition, which says that there are alternative ways of compliance. They talk about modern construction methods and significant advances in the hardware and software available to safety management teams. Karen R. White agreed with her colleague Ken Scott, stating, as Ken says, we recognise that we cannot provide for every eventuality. There will be some elements that can be done and should be done after the planning application, and it is about the reasonableness, it's about the understanding of the likelihood of risk and whether the measures proposed are proportionate to the risk. They have temporary traffic orders outside each of the matches in England between certain hours to accommodate the start and end, and you have to understand that issues are and work around them is about being flexible. So I will now, and finally, I'd like to quote previously from a quote that was raised previously at this committee. We hear enough about bad news stories, and some people have had the capacity to turn a good news story into a bad news story, as we know only too well. We flag up the fact that today it is a good news story, and the work is ongoing, and we will see 3 good stadiums in place in Northern Ireland in due course. Unquote. I hope you, Chair, will stand by those comments that you made to this committee in September 2010. I will allow the committee to make its own mind up on whether it is going to bring back all of the witnesses to question them under oath, rather than singling out individuals, and I would be happy to take questions in the future, but only after the committee has decided that all witnesses will be questioned on oath, or that no witnesses will be questioned under those conditions. It is only then that I will return to this committee to answer questions as soon as clarity has been achieved. I look forward to hearing from the committee. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is the Minister answering any questions?
Not listening.
Do you want me to read this statement out again, Chair?
Sorry. Minister, can you please sit down and answer questions?
I think I've made it clear. I'm not coming back to this committee to answer questions unless you have clarified the position of our no. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just we'll stop for a moment and suspend for just for a few minutes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll resume business, and
Sure.
there are a number of people. I think it was well. Okay, that's
Sure. Just at the start of play there, there was an intervention at the end of before the last session closed there from the public gallery. I'll put on record just that.
I didn't hear it.
Well, it was very obvious, Chair.
Oh, well,
I want to put it on record and I'd like to report it.
it wouldn't be answered, I'm sure.
Well, I hope. So if it's audible.
If it's audible.
If it's audible, it'll be answered again. Thank you.
Yes.
Chairman, I sat for an hour and a half, as did colleagues,
Yeah, I missed it.
as did people in the public gallery, and listened with courtesy to what the Minister said. Much of what the Minister said I had difficulty with, and I had a number of questions here, in fact 3 pages of questions to ask the Minister. And then the Minister leaves this committee and refuses to answer questions. Now, I think it's unprecedented from what I understand. I think it's discourteous. It's the latest in a string of discourtesies extended to this committee by the Minister and the Department. I think it's unsatisfactory and it's unprofessional. I don't think she's done anything to help her cause, the Department's cause, the issue in which we have this committee. And in fact, if I was a member of the GA, I wouldn't be happy with it either, because we need clarity and certainty around these issues before we move forward. However, I do think I want the opportunity now for members of this committee to raise the issues and the concerns that they've had. It's unfortunate we can't put them to the Minister, but I came here this morning to do just that. I came here on time this morning to listen to the Minister to do just that. I listened to her statement in full. I took notes of what she was saying because I wanted to ask questions, and she hasn't afforded me or anyone else the opportunity to do that. So I think what we should do is, as long as this is being Hansarded, is that we should raise the issues, the questions that we have, and put them out there. Because some of the notes I have here, some of the questions I have here, are completely contradictory to some of the evidence the Minister gave. So I propose that we do that.
Okay. It would also be open to us to send requests for information on points she might have raised to the Permanent Secretary, who would be obliged to respond to us. But Mr. Hamilton, if you wish to do that, please go ahead.
Okay, happy to.
Yes, please.
Chair, there were a number of issues which the Minister raised in relation to not being aware, and if the Minister has said under oath she wasn't aware of these issues until Mr. Scott came in front of this committee in April last year, then that's the stated position of the Minister. I do have to say, though, then that leaves me with serious concerns exactly what's been happening in that department, if that's the case. Because I want to know then what exactly the permanent secretaries of that department have been doing, the deputy permanent secretaries, those who have been in charge of the sponsor board from the department. What have they been doing? What has Sport NI been doing? Because there's a list of inconsistencies here in the evidence I have, both from Mr. Scott's bundle and from evidence from other people who have come in front of this committee. For example, if you look at the sponsor board minutes of December 2013, Antoinette McCune raises the issues that there's a dispute over the interpretation of the Green Guide. So that's December 2013. So who was there from the department? And whoever was there from the department, did they feed that through to the minister? If they didn't, why not? Were Sport and I meant to do that directly? Was there a conduit from the department? And who was that person? April and June of that year, it refers to an ongoing problem, and I wanted to ask the minister if she'd attended any of these meetings. And if these things have not been forwarded through to the minister, what disciplinary actions are being taken against those civil servants or public servants who fail to do so? Because if the minister isn't aware of any of this stuff, as she's reaffirmed to this committee under oath this morning, what exactly were these people doing? And in terms of the Sports Council minutes of June 2014, it states very clearly, members noted that there are some challenges on the design aspects of casements which centred on emergency exiting. Board members noted that DCAL had been made aware of the issues. I've raised this before at this committee. I've raised this before whenever DCAL officials have been here. I've raised it before whenever Sport NI officials have been here. So, state again, DCAL have been made aware of the issues. And we have a minister sitting here this morning telling us she wasn't aware of the issues. What have these people been doing if the minister hasn't been made aware of the issues? I then have a series of documents here where Mr Scott, who the minister spent quite a bit of time trying to discredit this morning, as others have done in the past, where Mr Scott has made it very clear in writing in terms of what he has set out in terms of the position around these issues and in terms of exiting. Right, there are ample amount of these things. I have 10 pages I can reference where Mr Scott has set it out, whether in letter form, in minutes or emails, where he at various fora has raised this issue. Again, I ask the question, what were senior people in Sport NI doing about it, and what were DCAL officials doing about it? Actually, the minister and those across the way who thought it was funny that the minister took part in their stunt and walking out this morning, actually the minister has done a great disservice, because the minister, by walking out of this committee, has left more questions unanswered than she answered. And if she thinks that that in any way helps her position, her party's position, takes the issue forward in West Belfast as she set out, or indeed helps the GAA, if I was a member of the GAA, I wouldn't be happy with that performance. As I said earlier, I think the GAA would be wanting clarity and certainty going forward. The minister provided none of that this morning. And I have to say, as well, the minister also made reference to Valerie Brown from Belfast City Council. When Valerie Brown from Belfast City Council was in front of this committee, if I recollect properly, Valerie Brown supported Mr Scott's position entirely. So I don't understand what the minister's reference was to Valerie Brown at all. And the town solicitor for Belfast, Mr Walsh, was sitting beside Valerie Brown and supported Valerie Brown's position in terms of Belfast City Council. There are other issues I wanted to raise in terms of the evacuation. The minister talked about the officials had just come back from a tour of the Midlands and stadia in the Midlands. Well, I understand they visited Coventry's ground, St Andrews, which is Birmingham's ground, Villa Park, which is Aston Villa's ground, and the Hawthorns, which is West Bromwich Albion's ground. All of those grounds have exiting of around 8 minutes. The minister didn't say that. And the other issue I want to turn to briefly as well, because the minister and other people referred in terms of the timeline that the minister set out and took great time, and I was pleased she did that actually, in terms of how to set it out, because we've had the minister now directing criticism towards you as we've had others. When you were chair of this committee, and it talked about Mr Scott and about Mr Scott and the 39,000 capacity or 40,000 capacity. I wanted to ask the minister, if I might start actually, in relation to Dominic Walsh. The minister took some time about Mr Walsh and set out the position there. I wanted to ask the minister what happened to the papers that were destroyed in the department that Mr Walsh couldn't get access to. why were papers destroyed? But we haven't had that opportunity to ask her that because of her stunt. And then Paul Scott, in terms of the design team, I think to be fair, Paul Scott, whenever an outline business case is set out, an outline business case is just that, and the Minister actually used the term, the outline business case is a guideline. Now, Paul Scott effectively would have been involved in that, yes. And figures have been talked about of 39, 40,000, whatever. But it also said in Minister's evidence when she talked about you, the GAA's view was 40,000. It wasn't Nelson McCausland's view, it was the GAA's view. So actually by using that quote, she undermined her case. So Green Book as well, Minister talked about Green Book, didn't mention that the Green Book actually evolves. It's a living document. There are a number of editions. There were a number of editions before this stadium was being discussed, and there have been, I'm sure, some since it started to be discussed as well. And in terms of the DFP approval, the business case, it talked about options for Casement Park. It wasn't a fixed capacity. It talked about options. And, you know, I do have to say, I have a whole raft of other questions. And I know that I'm supposed to ask a question now, but there's no point asking questions to people who actually have been interrogating these documents for close on a year, whenever the person we're actually going to ask questions of hasn't afforded us the opportunity. But I make a point again. The Minister's performance here today has actually undermined what the Minister probably came in here to set out to achieve. This committee will finish its work in a few weeks' time. Members across the way wanted this brought to a conclusion a number of weeks ago. It's very, very evident. This will never be brought to conclusion during the term of this Assembly, if ever. People are not prepared to come here and give evidence here in a way that enables people to cross-examine what they've said. Because I have to say, in relation to how the department has performed and senior officials within it, those currently and those before, and Sport NI, this has actually damaged both the department and Sport NI even further. And the minister's position actually undermines her own department, ironically.
Okay, could I just, before I come to Rosie McQuarrie, make a couple of observations? I understand that the Minister is entitled legally not to answer any questions. But I think that everyone else is then entitled to draw their own conclusions from that.
Yep.
The fact that she wouldn't answer any questions on any matter or on any aspect of this issue will, I think, raise questions, further questions in many, many minds as to why she won't. I'm interested in the fact that the core issue around which we were to bring her back under oath was the disclosure from Mr. Walsh that he had met with herself and her permanent secretary, Rosalie Flanagan, at a certain point, and at that meeting there was some reference to the demolition of houses to enable additional access to be provided for emergencies. He also said at that point that the Special Advisor, Jarlath Kearney, had been in the room. Now, when I look at the record there for the media, Mr. Kearney was appointed on around the 23rd of March 2012. My understanding is that Mr. Walsh left his position as chair of Sport NI around September 2012. So there's a little window there between nearly the end of March and September 2012, during which that meeting would have taken place. And I think what we need is to see how we can get some more information. It may be that all records have been erased, scrubbed, shredded, because I just find it very, very hard to believe, I don't think anybody would believe, that you would have meetings. Permanent secretaries tend to run around with large files in which they write things down. People do that. They take notes of meetings. You go to any politician's office, there'll be piles of paper, notes of this, that and the other. So that's just the nature of things. There would have been notes taken as an aid memoir. But it seems that all of this has somehow or other vanished. So it's important, if the Minister isn't going to answer questions under oath, then we'll have to pursue Mr Kearney and Mrs Rosalie Flanagan. Mrs Flanagan is coming next week. We'll see whether she answers questions or not. We just don't know. And finally, to say the core point was around this issue of the Minister's claim that until the 30th of April 2015, she was unaware until April 15 of issues around emergency exiting and the potential purchase and demolition of houses. Both issues were unknown to her before April 15. And yet, as has been noted previously, the then Chief Executive of Sport NI, after being in office for 1 year, did a newspaper interview on the 14th of June 2014 in which she said that there were concerns about emergency exiting. Not exiting, but emergency exiting. Because sometimes there's confusion between the two. And on that occasion, when she gave the interview, she referred to the success of Ravenhill, virtually completed, I think, at that time, the ongoing good work around Windsor Park, and then the one thing that she picked out, and it was only a short paragraph, sentence or two, in regard to Casement Park, was issues of emergency exiting. Nothing else. That was the top issue. But we have been denied the opportunity to ask the Minister questions. Mrs McCorley?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I just want to say that the member across the way made a couple of accusations there which I think are insulting. One, he said that the Minister had pulled a stunt. That was his word. And then he said we played a part in the stunt. I don't know what he is talking about, but I think it's an insulting accusation, and I would like to have him withdraw that. What I would like to say is, if everyone had been listening, the Minister made her case why she did not take questions. The Minister was brought here under oath. It was a vote taken by this committee on which we opposed. In a case where you have difference of opinion, where you've got contradictions in statements, in those circumstances, both parties should be brought under oath. But this was an attempt to subject the Minister to a form of questioning which was unfair, unjust, and it was not being not allowing the other person with the contradiction to deal with it, to be dealt with in the same way. So that was her decision, and I think she was quite right. She did say she is happy to come back and answer questions, but only when she is being treated fairly, which is absolutely right in my view. I don't see why the Minister should accept being treated unfairly. The other thing that I would say that I heard from the evidence this morning, and it might come out at some point, but Paul Scott's evidence talks about raising concerns about safety, but from what I'm hearing, he never made it through an official formal route, which is by the risks register. That's for me the way he should have done it if it was the red light issue that it was, but that he claims it to have been. But he didn't use the formal routes, and that's questionable.
I'd be wrong in this, but I first of all would comment that I don't think Mr Scott is responsible for writing the risk register. When we look at the minutes of Sport NI, it was the board of Sport NI and another official that seemed to take the lead on that issue, not Mr Scott. So he can't be blamed for something that wasn't his responsibility. As regards the point that you made, Mrs McCarthy, in regard to the member opposite you, I think possibly in this context of something that has never happened before in this Assembly, of a minister walking out and refusing to answer questions and thereby thwarting the democratic process, and democratic scrutiny by elected representatives, and by treating the committee in the contemptuous way, the shameful way that we were treated this morning, I think the word stunt is probably an understatement.
Yes.
Who next? Karen
There
McKevitt.
was a context for, and
Yeah, Karen McKevitt.
she explained why she.
Sorry, I should add, by the way, Mr. Walsh has already been invited, as you will know, members, to come back under oath. But of course, what we could end up with is he comes back under oath, makes a statement, goes out, then we'll bring her back under oath. It could be years at this. So it has become a farce. Well, it's been turned into a farce this morning. Mr. McKevitt.
Yeah,
Thanks very much, Chair. If the Minister had been here, I was going to raise about the June 2014 board meeting, Sport NI, in which Paul Scott and I think Nick Harkness at the time stated emergency exit was raised to the board as a risk, and I was going to ask, was this followed up to her by the Chair of Sport NI, the current Chair? Trying to remember some of the evidence as well, and I think most of the evidence that we've heard to date was actually in his time as Chair of Sport NI. So, you know, a lot of that was, I was going to go around the current chairs, maybe inviting him up to give evidence as well. I also was going to ask her about the current survey, which in fact the Minister had called for, of staff of the Sport NI, and in that survey it showed that 33.5% of staff witnessed or experienced serious bullying and harassment, and I was going to ask her through that, and that would have been on the back of Paul Scott's evidence and others. There's a load, actually a couple of pages maybe I was going to just for clarification, but I mean I think it's a waste of time actually.
Okay, thank you. David Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's been disappointing this morning. The Minister did say to us about it was all a programme for government and whatnot, but certainly this morning has done a disservice as we try to move all these projects forward and come to a conclusion. I think the difficulty is for me, it wasn't a he say, she say, or whatever at this stage, sir, because we did want to ask about the Miss Flanagan letter, the press release from Sport NI CEO, emails from Mr. Sutherland, written documentation of evidence from the SGSA and obviously Belfast City Council, and indeed queries over the outlying business case, which are all stuff that's in right. So it wasn't a sort of a allegation. So it was all fairly substantial evidence to ask the Minister on and seek clarity, because the reason why Paul Scott came here in April 15 was because no one was listening. That's the reason, and people forget that Paul was so far down the food chain, as it were, that there's others above there, both probably Sport NI and departmental decal, who should have been listening to Paul Scott and taking it on. But the written evidence indicates that it was well known difficulties, probably 13, 14, but we can't get any further this morning. I just don't know whether we should play the game or not, but that's what we're going to sort of the question we want to surround Mr. Humphrey, sum most of it up to,
Thank you. Councillor Hussein.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, just for the record, Mr. Humphrey said he was here for the entirety of this statement. He was not. He was missing. I'm sure the record will show that.
Oh dear. Pathetic.
I'm glad whatever questions the Minister did or didn't answer this morning, I think she answered quite a number of questions. She's answered more than you have, and you've been asked.
Hard to put questions when
you've been asked
repeatedly.
You've been asked repeatedly, and in terms of what she did say at the end, she said she would quite happy to answer questions when others have been afforded the same opportunity that she was afforded there this morning. So that's where it's at. I'm glad she did clear up some issues around the OBC in terms of your involvement and the numbers therein, the involvement of the Oversight Steering Group and that of the DFP. And the approval of the OBC is not about different options, it's the approval of the preferred option. And that, of course, was set by DFP at 40,000. So there are a number of things there that just need to be put on the record. And I think the Minister will appear in front of this committee again when others have been taken on the same circumstances.
I would suggest respectfully that with 2 weeks to go,
That's right.
a flurry of solicitors' letters a reluctance to get people, some part of some people to come, and the amount of time and business, and we have to take the last Tuesday before St Patrick's Day to produce our legacy report. And I assume that this will be one of the main items in the legacy report because. Sorry, if I could just let me finish. I will chair the meeting, and I'll just finish what I have to say. It's going to be very difficult to get much. I think it would be very difficult, it is impossible now to complete the procedure and to bring the Minister and the others back in time to fully consider what they have to say. It's a day that has been in some ways lost and wasted. On the other hand, the decision by the Minister to get up, walk out, refuse to answer any questions, may well say more about culpability than anything that could have been said in answer to questions.
Accountability.
As your observation too, Chair.
So, the one point that I really wanted to ask the Minister about was this. She quoted it herself, but it was whenever Mr Walsh said in reply to a question from me, he says it became a regular Friday meeting with the Minister and Permanent Secretary. If not every week, it was frequent. That, either there was a meeting or there wasn't a meeting, and we really need to get to the bottom of that. And I will say only one other thing about the general progress of the meeting. The key issue here was that emergency exiting should have been considered. All of the evidence that I have heard tells me we do need to make special provision for Casement Park. And it's not actually about pointing the finger about who knew what. It is, why was such an eventuality not discussed if it wasn't discussed? And if it was discussed, who was discussed with and at what time?
Okay, thank you. Leslie Crean.
Yeah, just to get back to sort of where two issues stand out for me. There's a lot of time spent denying that any issue of risk was raised. But I would remind the committee that we have had evidence which in fact shows that safety issues on exiting would be dealt with by the Blue Light Services and the City Council.
Right.
Now, this may well have been a pervading understanding in Sport Northern Ireland. You know, I'd like to have queried that. Was that not reported up then? And the second one, more recent, Chair, we know that Sport Northern Ireland High Command perhaps was autocratic, dictatorial, distant, and indeed many grievances were reported and still, I believe, ongoing. We tried to get to the bottom of those recently. They also had a recent survey carried out which in fact suggested the same thing, that there were people there who were having trouble with their senior management because of the style or whatever, and that a survey, you know, showed that still to be the case, and that, interesting enough, this survey was compared with one that had been done in Decal, which I thought interesting as well, you know, because why would that be? But there certainly looks like there's a prima facie case that there were problems with the High Command of Sport Northern Ireland, and would that have been the logjam? We don't know. I certainly would like to follow that one up.
Mr. McMullen, and then back to Mr. Murphy.
Yes, just a few items there on Mr. Hildy's talking about Mr. Scott being far down the food chain. He's pretty well up the food chain. And for somebody who's well up in the food chain, he never, the thing is coming through at every level. He never raised a red flag issue on anything.
You've a bundle of stuff that says he did.
Now, hold on.
Doesn't mean it.
Hold on.
Oh dear.
I take it your chair in the meeting chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
And the other thing that Mr. McRae did say, whether there was meetings or not meetings, it was clearly read out in the report this morning the number of meetings that were held and who was at them. But the thing is, not once, and it came up in the report today again, as it did from every other body that came before here, that there was no red flag issue raised.
Should have been.
Whether it should have been or not, that's, you know, you can talk about that all day, but the fact is it wasn't. And that's the main thing that came through. You know, because people have come here and made the statements that off the issue, off exiting, etc. Why was that not brought up at the start? And it brings back to yourself, Chair, when you were in the position of Minister, you didn't raise any issues of it. And it brings back to what I said before. You were the last piece of the jigsaw, but you yourself refused to come before the committee. So in that sense there, I think you do have something to talk to the committee about. You were there, you were part of the whole scene. Everybody else here was part of it, has been to the committee, on oath or not on oath. And you're the only one that's part of it, have refused steadfastly either to come under oath or voluntary come before the committee. And you have refused. And I think that's a damning indictment. And so therefore I'll ask you again today, will you come before the committee yourself?
Let Mr Humphrey back then. If he may well make a point, but if he doesn't, I'll make it myself after that. But
Yeah, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that with devolution, and this is a legislative assembly. This is part of the programme for government of the Northern Ireland government. And this committee is charged a considerable amount of public expenditure going into this project. This committee is charged with scrutinising the department, and that includes the Minister, because the Minister is the political head of the department. And my goodness, does this Minister lead it politically? Now, it is outrageous for members to say the Minister was treated in an unfair and unjust way. It's entirely appropriate that the Minister is brought in front of this committee in question, except she won't answer them. Now, I want to deal with the issue of your appearance. I personally have no difficulty with your appearance here, but this committee has voted on that issue. And why did we vote on that issue? First of all, the outline business case for this, for this particular project goes back to when you were the Minister. And it looked at options and it looked at guidelines. The Minister's own word, guidelines. Now, the sign-off came from DFP at that time, but the work on the serious work on this committee, on this project, doesn't start until we have a design team and we have an application going in to the Department of the Environment for planning. Now, you know, you ceased, to my best of my knowledge, but we'll put it on the record so there's no doubt, you ceased being Minister in the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure at the last election, prior to the last election in 2011. So, effectively, you had no role after that. The Minister set out this morning, those that maybe missed it, the design team was appointed in September 2012. It started its work seriously in February 13. Sorry, the Safety Technical Group was appointed in 2012. Mr Malloy was appointed in March 2012. The stadium programme was moved in-house, which is another question I wanted to ask the Minister, in April 2012. In the business case in December 14. How on earth can you answer any questions or any of that stuff? That's why this committee voted that you not be brought as a witness, because all of this stuff happened subsequent to you being the Minister. In terms of Mr Scott's appearance, and if Mr Scott raised any red flags or blue lights, I think his two appearances here show clearly that he did that. The bundle that Mr Hilditch referred to shows clearly that he did that. The fact that Belfast City Council were here and gave evidence to this committee confirmed he did that. And the fact that the Sports Ground Safety Authority came here and supported what he said shows that the man was doing his job. And I would put on record as well, when the Minister talks about the new chairman being independent in terms of the Safety Technical Group, so too was Mr Scott. He was an independent specialist, used not only in this part of the kingdom, but in other parts of this island as well. So let's be clear. Mr Scott is an expert. Mr Scott raised this issue on an ongoing basis, as both Mr Hilditch and I have mentioned before in previous contributions to this committee. So let's not have people say that Mr Scott never raised this issue. There's a bundle there that proves it absolutely, categorically, that he did just that.
For Basil, just to looking at that point from Mr Humphrey, and say on 2 occasions the committee took a decision as to who are they invite or not invite. That issue was put on 2 occasions and voted down on 2 occasions. But could I just set the record straight? The Minister referred to the date of the 21st October 2010 and said her words were that I approved something on that date. In actual fact, on the 21st of October 2010, what happened was the Permanent Secretary, Rosalie Flanagan, will be with us hopefully next week. Rosalie Flanagan sent the outline business case to Jack Laybury in the Department of Finance and Personnel with a cover letter. That's what happened in October 2010, on the 21st of October, and the DFP formally approved the outline business case on the 7th of March 2011. So that's correcting the misinformation that came from the Minister. So, Basil McCrae.
So, just the issue in response to Mr McMullen, through you, Chair. Emergency exiting should have been a red line issue. The risks were identified in the outline business case, something to be managed. People should have been aware of it. In my opinion, Casement Park cannot be redeveloped to the size that the developers wanted to, or the proposers wanted to, unless emergency exiting is satisfactorily resolved. It is a red line issue. I wanted to ask only these questions. The long submission that the Minister made, I thought was unnecessary. Had she stuck to just the issues of contention, did she have the meetings that Dominic Walsh said she had, or did she not? We would have had time to explore those issues. We could have dealt with other issues at another time. All we were trying to do was establish the facts, and had the Minister been on top of that particular issue, she should have focused on the issue and resolved the matter. And I am disappointed she did not take the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Horsham.
Chair, just to clear up the thing about the DFP. The DFP approved the stadium for 40,000. The design team were then duly bound to design it. Design a stadium for 40,000. That's where it's at. You know, it's just Mr. Humphreys is throwing in all sorts of red herrings there.
No. We've got the main issue today, that the Minister's departure, sudden departure. I'm sure we'll all want to reflect on that, and we'll also want maybe to get external advice on the best way to handle that, to make the best of the use of the remaining couple of weeks with the remaining witnesses and the Minister. It may mean that we have to have an extra meeting at some point over the next 2 weeks. So we'll leave the matter there for today on that. And could I apologise to our friends from the MAG, who might well be booking the Minister for a dramatic performance. And if we move on then to that, could I welcome then we have with us, if we'll have to. So other people earlier on thought they were able as well. But Anne McReynolds, the Chief Executive, and we have Ray Hutchinson, who's a MAC trustee and Managing Director of Gilbert Ash. Could I refer members to Clark's memo at page 61 of the plan, the MAC briefing paper at page 63, the raised paper on construction defects at page 67, and a response from DCAL regarding the MAC facade at page 72. Refer members also to the hard copy tabled opening statement from Dr Brian Gregory, SIB, which members heard at the meeting on Tuesday. The committee had requested the paper, and members may find it useful. It was emailed out to members yesterday. Both Anne and Ray are welcome, and if you want to proceed with your opening statement, please.
Thank you,
You're not
Chairman.
going to walk out after the statement, Randa?
I've enough humour for one day.
No comment.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee, for the opportunity to meet with you today and to brief you on some of the issues we're currently facing at the MAC. As you know, the MAC is one of UK and Ireland's most successful arts venues, involving hundreds of thousands of people in Northern Ireland's cultural life annually, and contributing approximately £10 million to our economy every year. The MAC is a registered charity and an expertly run organisation that subscribes to the highest standards of financial management, good governance, exemplary customer care and, of course, artistic excellence. We are particularly proud of the fact that over 250,000 annual visits, 25,000 of these are people of all ages, abilities and backgrounds who take part in the MAC programmes every year, and that many of these people wouldn't normally darken the door of a contemporary arts centre. Given the quality of everything we do in the MAC, the defect that's apparent in the building's facade is an issue of great concern and huge disappointment for MAC trustees, staff and volunteers. When this matter arose, it received immediate attention and action, and since that time we've managed the situation in an ongoing manner in a way which prioritised public safety, safeguarded the building against any potential further damage, and enabled us to remain open to the public from Greater Belfast, throughout Northern Ireland and from outside Northern Ireland. Members can be assured that the MAC has taken all possible measures to ensure that the building poses no risk to our many customers and partners, and Ray and I will be happy to share some detail on that with you in the course of this morning, and to try to answer any questions you may have. But just before proceeding, I'd like to be clear that the history of how and why the MAC was created is highly relevant to a number of the questions you've been raising in recent weeks. We can provide the committee with an exhaustive and lengthy history of the MAC's development phase, as what emerges from this is an understanding that the MAC was created directly out of Northern Ireland's government's aspirations to meet targets around urban and economic regeneration, income from tourism, income from increases in social cohesion and improvements in the built environment. The MAC was not created as the result of a solo run from a small arts organisation. It was and is a strategically important project that was created to meet the targets of a number of government departments. That is why the MAC's capital funding profile shows such a high percentage of public funding. That is why key aspects of the MAC are as they are, such as its location, its business model, and even the sizes of its theatre and galleries. The MAC was and is a project that was created out of the vision and targets of its core funders, DCAL and the Arts Council and their advisors in CPD and DSD Laganside. It's particularly the case that the MAC's capital build was a joint and shared project, which was delivered with close support and oversight from the funders and advisors I've just mentioned. The phases of the capital project that were carefully considered and adjudicated on by the funders and their advisors included procurement, forms of contract, the appointment of the building contractor and capital spend. This being the case, it's true to say that the MAC was built by following all best and current thinking and guidelines about how to build a building like the MAC as safely and cost effectively as possible. The issues involved in the capital build phase of the MAC are complex in and of themselves and have been further complicated given the fact that Bowen, the larger of the two builders who came together to create Bowen Mascot Joint Venture, or BMJV, the building contractor, went into receivership in July 2011 during the construction phase. In August 2012, the joint venture also went into administration. We welcome this opportunity to do everything we can to bring some clarity to the perfectly reasonable questions the committee has been asking in recent weeks. And to this end, we thought it might be useful if we shared our knowledge in relation to some specific queries that have been asked by some committee members. The main areas you've asked for clarification on include the various roles and responsibilities on all sides, current liabilities, health and safety, procurement and contractual issues, including protection measures within the contract, timeframes and project costs. Many of these issues were addressed in the course of SIB's evidence to this committee on the 1st of March, and so we don't intend to cover that ground again. But we will try to address any issues that may still be unclear. On roles and responsibilities, the structure of this capital build project followed the principles set out in CPD's Achieving Excellence in Construction guidelines. This was a funder's requirement, as would have been the case for any major capital development project receiving substantial public sector funding. So, from the beginning of the capital phase, lines of communication, accountability and reporting were clear, and key roles such as IDMs or investment decision makers, SRO and project sponsors were allocated. A project board was established and chaired by joint IDMs from the Arts Council and DCAL was advised on procurement and all elements of risk pertaining to all aspects of the project by their advisors in CPD. DSD was also represented at the project board level. In addition, SIB provided an advisory role through DCAL. The MAC and its professional consultants reported at every project board meeting. The project board was there to provide a high degree of oversight and scrutiny, and they did this really well. The issues currently facing the MAC have not come about because of poor decision making or poor risk management by the MAC or the project board. The problem with the MAC's facade was not caused by poor governance or the wrong procurement method being chosen or the wrong form of contract being used. The MAC and its capital funders have been engaged in a process for some time to try to ascertain what the cause of the problem is and who therefore is responsible, because all of that goes directly to the key question, to the key issue: who pays to rectify the defect? In order to address the specific issue, the MAC appointed Corson McDowell as specialist legal advisors in June 2015. As I've said, this is by its nature a complex issue, and we can't prejudice any potential legal activity or future actions, but we do want to be as transparent as we can be with you. So we've brought a statement along from our legal advisor, which is the most that we can currently say about any future legal action that may be possible. And with your permission, I'll read it out. It's not long. The MAC is limited as to what it can currently say in an open forum as to the extent of which other parties are or may be liable for the problems that have occurred with its building and the prospects of recovery from those parties. The matters are the subject of legal advice and correspondence which the committee will understand it would not be appropriate for the MAC to share in public. However, the MAC and its lawyers have been investigating and corresponding with both the MAC's consultant design team engaged in the project and with the contractor. On the basis of the expert technical advice the MAC has received, it seems to be the case that the problems with the external stonework have arisen from a combination of apparent shortcomings in the workmanship, design, quality control and supervision provided during the project. Legal correspondence has also been exchanged with the parent companies of the contractor, which is itself in liquidation, under the terms of a parent company guarantee provided to the MAC, which guarantees the performance of the contractor's obligations. Ultimately, legal proceedings may be required against some or all of the parties. However, before commencing such proceedings, the MAC will take advice on the likely costs involved and the risks in relation to the recovery of those costs. And that concludes the legal advice. Before moving on to questions, we do want to highlight and address one absolutely vital issue, and it's one which various members have raised in recent committee hearings, and it relates to the safety of the MAC. There is no question that the MAC has taken all possible measures to ensure that its building is safe for all our customers. The scaffolding which is currently in place has been installed in the most prudent, risk-averse way possible, But the scaffolding is only an interim measure and is not an effective or desirable long-term solution. So to conclude, we find ourselves in a regrettable situation which is not in any sense a result of any fault or failing on the part of the MAC. Nevertheless, we recognise absolutely the need to manage the current situation with our facade to ensure that the building operates to its maximum efficiency and value. We also need to identify and execute a long-term resolution of this building issue while pursuing vigorously every possible legal remedy, and we are doing all of those things. The committee can be assured of that. At the same time, and I know from individual conversations with several of you that you agree with this sentiment, we all need the MAC to work. And while the external building work is under scrutiny today, it is what happens inside the MAC that will be relevant and important in the years and decades to come. And I've got 2 more paragraphs. Finally, just to remind you what a wonderful asset the MAC is for Northern Ireland now and in the future, I'd like to end with a few words from the judges of last year's Museum of the Year award, for which the MAC was shortlisted. Museum of the Year is the arts sector's equivalent of the Oscars, and to be shortlisted after only 2 years of operation was a remarkable achievement. The judges said they were entranced and astonished by the MAC, a striking addition to Belfast, which had transformed the Cathedral Quarter, lifting its eyes to the wider horizon. The ambitious curatorial programme was of the highest quality, looking internationally while also supporting the talent of homegrown artists. Although only 2 years old, the MAC has clearly won the heart of its visitors, a remarkable place to call their own that isn't associated with Belfast's troubled past, but where instead they can come and create something new and inspiring for themselves. The judges look forward to the next stage in the lifetime of this new creative powerhouse, confident that there are only greater things to come. So that concludes everything I want to say, although I am going to add my very favourite quotation from a MAC customer. It was an 8-year-old boy who, after seeing our 2015 Christmas show, put on record that that was better than Xbox.
Okay.
And just to give Ray his full designation, Ray is currently the SRO for the MAC project.
Thank you. Start off with which go on. Councillor Washington.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Alan, for the presentation. I do concur with you in terms of the MAC. It is a wonderful addition to the city and to the north. Actually, there are quite a number of events in it. And, it's different, nice way,
Yeah.
in that way. So it is. It is a bit of disappointment. I'm sure corporately it's maybe even damaging, this ongoing saga about repairs, some of which, just to look at that most recent one, if it's any consolation, that's March damage there. That was a night of high wind, and I know there was a lot of damage done to various places, including my own local library actually on the roof of it that night. So, but the other ones are much more serious. And I was talking to Gordon Best yesterday or the day before of the Quarry Producers Association. He was telling me that the Giants Causeway Interpretive Centre is built of the same material and the same process or similar process. I'm wondering, we've got this position. How can it be fixed? Maybe Ray, you might.
Yeah, I'm happy enough to answer that. I suppose where we are now is we have the final CONSARC report. We received that report last week, so CONSARC are one of the recognised stone conservation experts in Northern Ireland, certainly, and even further afield than that. So we now have their report, which speaks to both the issues that we're faced with and how they think those issues can be addressed as we move forward. We have taken that report. We now have, obviously, our business case approved, and through a resource which has been afforded to us from SIB, we have started a process of appointing a consultant who I hope, and we hope, will take this process forward with us. So we have advertised for that consultant. We're now going through the PQQ process, and we're hopeful that we will have a consultant appointed by certainly the end of April of this year. That will then lead to us seeking to appoint a contractor. And again, we're hopeful that we will have the contractor in place by the middle of this year, with the view to having the facade replaced certainly by April, May time of next year. That's certainly our expectation at this stage, so long as we can continue to go along those particular timeframes.
I suppose the way the man on the street is looking at it, that, you know, and that cost 18 million of public monies, and it is very, very disappointing. You know, how did it go wrong? How did we get to this position?
Well, I suppose I can certainly say, and I'm sure you'd understand it, we share your frustrations. We certainly, neither Anne nor myself nor the Board of Trustees nor the senior management team want to be sitting here today faced with the issues that we're faced with. I think we are, as we said, they're limited to a certain extent in terms of what we're able to say, because we're obviously subject to a sort of a process. However, what I can say is that we have left no stone unturned in respect to determining who is at fault and who is responsible for the issues that we're faced with.
Could I interrupt? Sorry, apologies. I have to leave for a few minutes. Something urgent has cropped up. Would members be agreeable if our most senior member, and I treat that as a comment on the scene on this, the respect we have for him.
Can't be me you're talking about.
If Leslie took the chair.
Is there someone to second that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
As long as he lets me speak.
So we are, now that we have the finalised CONSARC report, we are now, as I say, starting this process, and hopefully we can put this to bed once and for all.
And when do you expect that to be complete?
In terms of the legal piece, or the
whole.
Okay, well, there are clearly two strands. There's the legal piece. We now, as I say, through the report, we now understand who we believe to be responsible for the various elements of the works that have gone wrong. So in conjunction with our legal advisors, we will work out the most appropriate course of action in terms of seeking recovery from the various parties that were involved and who we believe have contributed to that. Now, that is going to be, in and of itself, probably a fairly lengthy process, I would say. As you would know, legal recovery is not short term. It can be fairly well drawn out. So I think what we are hopeful of is, alongside that legal recovery process, we can have the MAC restored to where we want it to be by, as I say, April, May of next year.
Remove the ugly scaffold.
And remove the scaffold.
That's great. Thank you.
May of next year, that's good. Carolyn?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much for coming this afternoon. Who's paying?
Pardon?
Who's paying for the works to be complete by? Is it DCAL?
Well, we have at this stage got the business case approved. I suppose our primary funder is the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, and in turn DCAL. So, as I understand it, DCAL have approved that business case. So.
But if I could just add, there was an interesting conversation during SIB's evidence on the 1st of March, where Brian Gregory, who performed the function of SRO for quite a time during the MAC capital phase, pointed out that although there are complexities around public funding and CSR periods and DFP approvals, it's our understanding that there's a figure of approximately £600,000 that was allocated to the MAC capital project that has not been spent. One of the issues that was in the global cost plan, as it was called, and reported upon very regularly, included a series of allocations for risk. There was an optimism bias figure, there was a risk register allocation, and there was also a figure of £850,000 against projected and potential VAT liability. So if we weren't able to get VAT liability, we ended up, the settlement with HMRC was in the region of 70,000. So although the allocation for that VAT liability did reduce over the course of the project, and at the end of the project was reduced down to 650,000, that combined with the optimism bias and the risk, we reckon that there's around £600,000 that was allocated and approved by DFP for the project that has not been spent on the project. Now, that's not, nobody has, I don't have that money, DCAL, I would imagine, doesn't have that money, but nevertheless, it was approved at that level.
Yeah, I got a quote to get a job done 3 or 4 years ago myself, and had the money to do it, and I still have the money to do it, but if I went back today to get it done, I wouldn't get it done for the same price, do you know what I mean? And I do have issues, not with the MAC. I think absolutely brilliant. And the fact that you're an award with, even winning awards for the actual building itself is amazing. To me, the investment has been delivered in the services that's been coming out from the MAC. Absolutely, the investment from Decal, the whole outcome has been delivered. It's a bit of stonework at the back that has failed, not the MAC. And the production and everything that goes on inside it. It's stonework, and the responsibility of that, well, you know now who's responsible for it according to your report or legal advice that you've just sort of read out. But to me it's not Decal. I do have issues with the department forking out almost £1 million, just short of £1 million, when we have libraries we're trying to keep open and services right through the arts, short enough budget as it is. You know, I do have issues with it, and when it's not the fault of Decal, we have delivered, as I say, and so has the MAC. It's unfortunate that you're in this process, but I mean, the recovery of that, if Decals were to pay for the fault, that whole process and the legal fees alone on that is going to be horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Who's paying for that?
Well, I think that's the point where we will get to, and believe me, we do share your frustrations. We don't want to be sitting here today pleading for £1 million. That's certainly not where we want to be. We would rather be sitting here with steady state, the MAC operating, which it is doing internally. The MAC is operating to the extent that it should be. However, we have no option. I mean, the MAC is publicly funded. We have no choice but to ask for these funds. The facade cannot stay in the state that it's in. We must replace the facade. There's no alternative to that. The facade must be replaced. You are right. In terms of the legal redress we might have against the various parties concerned, that will be long and that will be expensive. And I think it's important that we sit down with our funders and make them alive to that fact before we embark on that process, because there is a risk you're putting further money into the pot.
And could I just also add, I'm really very attuned to what you're saying. I completely agree. Those of us who work in the arts are at the absolute sharp edge of underfunding, generational underfunding. There isn't an arts organisation, well, the MAC, I can only speak for the MAC, there isn't a penny of public money wasted in the MAC. It is the leanest, most efficient organisation it could possibly be. So it's not in our DNA to waste, nor is it, just to be clear, it's not that the MAC sat back and said, oh, we've got a problem here. Decal, will you please fix it? We did two things whenever it became clear that there was an issue. We began to consider how there might be redress. How has this happened? Who's responsible? What are we going to do about that? And that takes some time. And at the same time, we talked to our lead funder, the Arts Council, to make them aware that there was an issue. The Arts Council made an application to Decal. You know, we don't have a relationship with Decal. We have a relationship with the Arts Council. So I would be really horrified if anybody in this room or outside this room thought that the MAC felt that it was owed £1 million. That's not the case at all, but we have a responsibility as a publicly funded shared space in our city centre to make ourselves absolutely healthy and safe.
But at the same time, if the scaffolding put up, yes, it might be a bit of an eyesore for those that can see it, but it is safe. With the scaffolding put up, it's not affecting the business that the MAC deliver the way it is at the minute, or is it?
Well, there's a number of factors at play there. Clearly, the longer the scaffolding remains around the MAC, the more cost will be incurred. There is a cost of having the scaffolding around the building. There's a cost of the inspections, the regular inspections that we have ongoing of the facade to make sure.
Could you give me an idea on what it is monthly?
It's £2,000 a month. So there is an ongoing cost associated with the status quo that we're in at the moment. We've clearly spoken to our legal advisors around this, and their clear view is that the longer that continues, we have an obligation to mitigate any losses that we incur whenever we come to pursue the relevant parties that are involved. So we can't continue to incur costs without having a solution in place. So that's, and I believe I share your frustrations and I sense your frustrations, but I think we have no alternative but to replace the facade.
Okay. And it just in terms of health and safety, it is absolutely the case that the MAC is now a healthy and safe place. Yeah. But the scaffolding is not a long-term issue. It is not a long-term solution to this problem. While it's there, the facade is potentially still degrading. So it's not it can't be, it's not an appropriate solution for it to continue to stay in place for a long period of time.
But now that you know the source of where the fault lay, certainly could you not start proceedings there now without fixing it? I'm not saying it's a right or wrong, I'm just asking.
Start legal proceedings?
Yes.
Yes, we'll be sitting down. We've only just got, as I say, the Consart report through last week, which concluded responsibility and who was responsible for the various elements of the work. So it's certainly our intention now to sit down with our solicitors, discuss the legal options.
Could that be done without it being fixed and spent £1 million and that process being started?
Well, the legal process can certainly begin, but as I say, from our perspective, we have an obligation to mitigate any loss that we're incurring. As Anne said, the scaffolding has immediately secured health and safety risk to the public. The stone is deteriorating. So while we are confident that there is no health and safety risk posed to the public as we sit here at the moment, but as time continues and as time passes, the stone will deteriorate. So I don't believe it's tenable that we can just sit back, wait for a legal process which could take 12, 18, 24 months, and at the back end of that have incurred legal fees without that being replaced now.
Chair, can I just maybe ask that the project manager that was involved in the MAC come and make a presentation to us as well on their responsibility?
We've corresponded to see what all those rules are, so once we've pinned all that down.
Okay. Thanks very much. And again, I couldn't credit the MAC enough in the job that's done, and it's just unfortunate. But I mean, we are scrutinising. It's our role to scrutinise payment, and I do have big issues with it. And it's just unfortunate that this has happened to, as I say, an award-winning building. But it's. I still have massive issues with paying out nearly £1 million on a fault that wasn't belonging to the Arts Council or the department.
Sorry.
Thanks, Karen. We've covered it. There really are two separate issues, as you know, and they're in parallel at the moment. So, Oliver, you in fact had a question. You still have a question?
Yes, I still have a couple of questions here. Has any other project got the same stone facade?
The basalt that we have on our facade at the MAC, it has been put into use at the Giant's Causeway Visitor Centre, but it's in a very different application. At the MAC, it's used as a facade, as a stone cladding and very thin sort of stones, whereas at the Giant's Causeway it's in blocks. So it has been used in buildings previously, but in a different application.
And I suppose it's hard for you to answer this, but do you think that the arrangements set up for this contract were proper, in the sense that, for example, the money laid down was only there for a year. You know, the money that was when you got to your practical completion. On a job such as that, 18 million.
Yeah.
Would that not have been longer than a year?
Again, I suppose it would be normal in construction that.
Not for that size of job, not a year.
No, well,
not a year. You would get a year in a 3-bedroom house.
No. I mean, I suppose I'm aware of a different construction hat. It is normal in construction that, once you hit practical completion of the project, retention may have been 5% or may have been 3%, but at that stage you release half the retention, and you then have a year within which you have a defects rectification period, and at that point you have making good of defects. I mean, I'm clear that I don't think there's any sort of change in respect to the contract of the MAC to any other building projects.
This be something we should be looking at for any other project this size, that there should be a longer retention period, because that year, even if it says here, I'm just reading it very quickly, that even if everything blah 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 would still not have covered it.
Well, I suppose Anne made the point just now that we still do have £200,000 of retention withheld on the Bow and Mascot joint venture. So we do have, sorry, the MAC doesn't have the £200,000, but Arts Council or DCAL has £200,000 of retention that was originally earmarked for this particular scheme. So with £200,000 which can contribute towards this problem. There also was a final account that was agreed with Bow and Mascot of £50,000 that didn't and wasn't paid across them at the time. So it certainly be our view that there's £250,000 still allocated to this project that has been withheld from Bow and Mascot. That can be addressed and can be used towards the cost of the defects rectification.
And it really wouldn't, that's a drop in the ocean compared to the rest of it, as I appreciate that. But The retention figure of the contract is just over £1 million or something.
The retention was 3%, so it's 3% up until practical completion. Practical completion had dropped back to 1.5%. Again, that would be fairly normal in the construction
for
market.
1 year. This is the point I'm making
Yeah.
here. For the size of a job, 18 million, with only a retention of 1 year, going from 3% to 1.5%.
That would be quite normal.
I think that that's an awful hole in the bucket there, you know, because there should be better safeguards put in there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much more we can do with this. I agree with you, etc. But I think we need to be looking at that again. 18 million, and you've only a year's retention, which actually could not be a year. It goes back from 3 to 1.5%.
It does, yes, it does.
And, I think the retention was just over £1 million.
It was, yeah.
So there's 250.
Well, no, I'm trying to think. Actually, it was 3% of £13 million. So that's what, 360 or £400,000. So that dropped back to. Well, I suppose you could see retention being withheld at 5% in the current market. I think you might struggle to get contractors that might agree to retention being held for a longer period of time. But that's only my view.
And your retention, the Gilbert Ash was 50% of that retention.
No, we weren't the bit. Gilbert Ash wasn't.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Move on.
Sorry, just for clarification, if I can go back in. So you said it was 2,000. It was costing the MAC £2,000 a month for the scaffolding to come up, but there was a retention of 200,000.
Yes.
That's 8.5 years scaffolding.
Other things to be done, Carol.
But that's money that...
I suppose all we're saying is there are retention monies that we believe can go and contribute towards the cost of the defects rectification. But the longer the status quo remains, we're incurring £2,000 of additional costs month by month until we get to a point where
sorry, Chair, you said that there was a retention.
What do you have to do to get to speak in this place?
Sorry, it's an important point. There's no way that money could be transferred. That money it couldn't possibly be used for the scaffolding.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, we could
I didn't know that.
People that have left the meeting. We have people that have spoken already that haven't got to speak. I would like to speak on this question.
And I was about to ask you to.
Well, I'm just saying that there are important things, and you, like me, have got issues on today that we have to deal with.
Yes. And that's why you're the last person down the list of speakers.
And I'm glad to see you back, because Mr. Cree was just smiling at me but didn't quite get me on in time.
Oh, I anyway, on the list. Don't panic.
I was on the list. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to declare an interest, which is that I am interested in the arts. I'm interested in the MAC in particular. I commend you for the work that you do. It's spectacular. I'm also really impressed with the staff, your two selves, and Brian Gregory, who was here last week, and those members that were asking questions may have wanted to talk to Brian Gregory of the SIB about retention rates, about the stress it puts on balance sheets if you increase it too much, and about those costs. So before you start saying we want extra retention or longer periods, you need to look at the total package. So, the key point, the MAC must get back to business. The scaffolding must come down as quickly as possible. Can you tell me how quickly you can get it down and what it takes to get it back? Because it is a flagship project for us.
Well, if we get a fair wind and...
Oh, we win.
It will be March, April 2017 when the building work could be complete.
When does the scaffolding come down then? At the end of that?
It will come down at the end of that, yes, indeed. Yeah.
Is there any impact? I heard you say, obviously, the stone is degrading whilst we wait. It's just one of those things. And I take your reassurance that it's safe. That was one of my big concerns. Is there a negative impact with having the scaffolding there in terms of people utilising the building? You know, is it turning people off, or is it just not sightly? What's your concern about the scaffolding being up?
Well, our concern would be the same kind of concern that any business would have if one of its major elevations and the way in which it announces itself to its public is deeply constrained. It's a situation, as you've just said, that I think everyone in this room and everyone involved in trying to promote Northern Ireland as a space in which to invest and which to visit ought to be concerned about.
Okay, so I've got that point. Can you explain to me, just for the benefit, because we were concerned that £1 million might be, if no legal remedies exist, because the people have gone bust or you can't win the case, but there is still some elements of a contingency funding around, which I understood to be the allowance for the VAT, which was 600,000, but then you did have to pay a bit for the VAT, I think 70, was it? You said something like that. And then there's also a contingency on drawn down of about 200,000 from the OB.
Yeah.
So the net sum that's not drawn down, if you like, is circa
620,000,
which will go a long way to remedying the situation if we have to call upon it. So the real loss to the public purse is notional rather than real.
That is absolutely our understanding in terms of the figures, but it is outside our gift to make any comment about whether DFP would approve that. I mean, it would be between DCAL and DFP to make the argument that potentially this is a different CSR period. I don't understand, and I don't think anybody who doesn't work in DFP understands the internal machinations of how decisions are reached, but I know that there's a lot of thought that goes into it. I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way.
It's a whole different topic. We don't have time to talk about how the machinations go on there.
But it's probably, well, it's almost entirely, for sure, not as simple as £620,000 wasn't spent that was approved, but that is...
So all of us here understand or ought to understand the implications about contracts and DFP and whatever, but to the general person in the street, what they will be concerned about is, well, you've spent circa £18 million and now it's gone wrong, you need another million, and we could have been spending that million on something else. So I won't take too much longer. I just want to put on the record that Brian Gregory was fantastic. We didn't get to hear all of what he had to say, but he was great at explaining the contractual things. You here, both of you, have reassured me that you know what you're doing and that you're acting in the best interests of the MAC and the public. And I just wish you every success. I would like to see it resolved as quickly as possible. And I do not believe that the public is at risk of losing money. But if there is money to be spent, then it is money well spent, because the MAC does a wonderful job for regenerating that part of the city and for the city as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask a question here in regard to contracts management or project management, because it's an issue that crops up in regard to a whole series of issues, sporting and arts. The firm of, if I get the name right, and I probably won't, Hackett Hill and
Hackett
Hall. Right, well, close. Hackett Hall and McKnight.
It's approximately right. Yeah.
It's thereabouts. They were in as project managers. No.
No, they were the architect.
But who actually manages the thing, and how is it managed on a day-to-day basis to make sure that it keeps an eye on the fact they're putting in good stone or whatever the issue is?
Well, Hall McKnight, I suppose what the MAC did was we appointed Hall McKnight as our architects as part of an integrated design team. Hall McKnight in turn appointed a series of consultants, sub-consultants, and we have a contractual relationship back to each of those sub-consultants. So, for example, on the structural engineering side, there was Bureau Happold. On the QSing side, there was Billy Connor. Project management was AECOM. So, from the MAC's perspective, we were reassured that there were companies of expertise involved in that project all the way through. And I think, as Anna said in our piece earlier on, month by month, then we had our project board meetings, which were attended by the joint IDMs, the SRO, and the construction project was reviewed on a monthly basis.
And just since the appointment of the integrated design team, the architect-led integrated design team, as we called it, preceded Ray's involvement in the MAC, just for a point of clarification, the project management function within the integrated design team was fulfilled by Scott Wilson.
No,
is that a person or a company?
No, it's a company, and they're since renamed AECOM.
Yes, at the time it was Scott Wilson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I apologise for having to leave there during the presentation. Members content then?
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
For coming in.
Thank
you.
From your money over to.
We're now experts.
We all know a little bit about lunch.
Something. Put this way, we know more than we did know.
Thank you.
Goes along.
I would like I'm not sure whether it was the project manager for the MAC or the project manager for the department. The project manager for.
It's not for the
I didn't
department.
realise there was.
Just a lot of people.
Few,
Yeah.
but I'd at least like to hear
I think
from
it's the project manager for the Mac company. Or the Mac.
It's the project manager who's responsible.
Yes.
Do you know, like, is it decals? Was there a decal?
No, that's the Arts Council.
The arts was it the Arts Council? Had they a project manager?
Mike is no dealing with decal.
No.
We've asked for from both the SIB and I think the department as well, might have been the Arts Council, I'm trying to recollect, about roles and responsibilities and so on. Because there do seem to be complex parallel layers of people being project managers and SROs and so on. It does seem there's a lot more companies involved than I think the committee really first understood. And trying to actually work out who did what is quite complicated.
We got a diagram at one point in regard to placement of lines of
yes, that's what we want.
whole thing. Can we have something similar to that for this, maybe?
But
The same that
I just think that the project manager for the MAC, whoever it may be, needs to come and speak.
From the time.
Yes, from the time.
One of the ones that's called.
I think, Chair.
It might be. We'll
Why is it complex?
I think it was the architect.
check into that because
is it not that
with
that
us.
was named at the end there, Scott Wilson?
No, I think it was that other, the architect.
Packet home.
Paul
Hall
McKnight.
McKnight.
McKnight, aye.
Yeah.
Chair, let me work on
It's
that.
now Hall McKnight. They've lost Hackett.
They are, I think.
Okay, well,
Let me work on trying to
yeah,
establish
and-
just exactly who that is.
Okay. Nice wee diagram. I understand. Thank you.
I'll do my best
Okay.
on that, Chair.
Members content with that? Thank you.
Not to pay, just content with the presentation and the finishing
No,
of
we're
it.
going to get the information. Could I refer members then to the table pack responses from a number of the witnesses who gave evidence to the committee? These responses are in direct reply to Paul Scott's analysis of their evidence in the Hansard transcript. Responses have been received from Ciarán McGurk, Carl Southern, Oran McCluskey, Rory Muskelly, Mike Price and Noel Malloy, and those are at the relevant pages in your pack.
There's a point 36 through the
Could we acknowledge members' agreement to right to acknowledge these responses and to provide any necessary clarification? Also in the table pack at page 83 is the department's response regarding the provision of papers to Dominic Walsh ahead of the briefing to the committee. And are we content to note that?
Yep.
Okay. After then, back to this. We're on to matters arising, page 86 of the table papers, providing the names of who has been invited to the Minister's function regarding sporting successes in 2015. Mr Dunn had requested that information at the last meeting, and if we could note that.
What page is that, sorry?
Page 86.
Thank you.
It starts 86, but the actual sort of table itself is
Bit
page
further on.
90.
Yes.
But it lists everybody who's been invited as part of that
Yes.
celebration of sporting success. We just wanted to get a breakdown.
And just check them in here from.
Jonathan Ray, I think, was the one that Mr Dunn wanted, and he's on it.
And anyway, get the balance right there. Everything, just keep everything right.
It's very
Geographical,
long.
everything.
It's fairly long.
Right. We've got a list here we can look at it if we need to come back. What's the date of the event again?
It's next. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Okay.
Who's on the list?
We're on holidays, aren't we?
Well,
It's the Minister's celebration of success later on this month, and it's in Enniskillen Forum.
Right. Then correspondence, point 61 and 62. There's the decal correspondence at page 69 of the table pack from decal regarding the consultation on the draft statutory rules to provide privileged access to information contained in courts and inquest files. That's a consultation. Can we note the documents at this stage and they'll be brought back to the committee as a substantive item at the next meeting on the 8th, next Tuesday? Point 63, table pack, page 194. is a copy of the submission from Arts and Business NI to the consultation by DCAL on strategy for culture and arts, and just I think noting that. And then point 6.4, referring members to the DFP response to draft budget 16/17 at page 204 of the table pack. This item was not dealt with at the meeting on Tuesday. Finance and Personnel Committee have asked DFP to address issues regarding the engagement between DFP and departments, and if you are content to note that at this stage. Chairperson's business, page 225 of the table pack. Invitations from Arts and Business NI to events planned to mark Creativity Month. On the 10th of March, there will be a creative training for business event at the offices of Herbert Smith Freehill in the Gasworks at 10 a.m. On the 2nd of March in the Crescent Arts Centre, Creativity Showcase running from the 12th, if I can even talk right today, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Point 7.2, referring members to page 227 of the table pack for invitation from National Museums NI to the BP Portrait Award 2015. The event is taking place on the 10th of March at 6:30 at the Ulster Museum, and please let the team know if you plan to attend any of the events. Forward Work Programme, page 80. Clark,
Sorry.
Go ahead. Rosalie
Just to
Flanagan.
update, we have Rosalie Flanagan as confirmed for next Tuesday, that's the 8th of March, and as Chair said before, we've scheduled in the legacy report for Tuesday the 15th, but what we hope to do is have it in the pack for Tuesday and Thursday next week, so that members can see it before we actually deal with it then at that meeting on the 5th.
It should have been.
Okay. Then any other business? The only other thing I would mention is if it was appropriate that as a committee we send a letter of congratulations on Carl Frump winning the IBF and WBA Unified for Bottomgate title. Members are agreeable to send a letter?
Great.
Yes.
And Mr. McMahon.
Yes.
Yes, Chair. Chair, just an article on yesterday's Irish News regarding the IFA's children's programme, which is cross-community grassroots matches, which are held on a weekly basis at the Tommy Patton Park in Ver Avenue here in Belfast, and the presence there of a paramilitary mural, paramilitary and other flags. I wonder, could we possibly write to Belfast City Council and perhaps the IFA express their concern in terms of that, exposing young kids from right across the community in a sporting venue?
Any points from the members wish to make?
You shouldn't have sporting event, these sort of things. That's sporting event, nor should they be called after them either.
Yeah.
Or is it,
I think,
in the playing fields or outside?
It's just behind the goalies.
Is it in the ground? Yeah.
Just behind them.
Graffiti?
It's not graffiti, it's a mural.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen the article, so
Can Jonathan have that, just so we have the
It's
reference?
in yesterday's Irish News, just if anybody wants to.
Okay. Members, any proposals? Right. Okay.
Mr. McMullen is.
Oh, yes, sorry, Mr. McMullen, yes.
Mr. McMullen? No.
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 Chair, there's no others I'd like to raise points.
Yes.
In terms of the Ms. Flanagan's visit to this committee next week, can I just ask, in terms of the invitation that was extended to the Minister today, and therefore the invitation that will be extended to Mr. Flanagan when she comes, what exactly did we ask the Minister to do today?
Come and, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what it said, but essentially come on specific issues to, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it said exactly. It's in the pack, but I think you're referring to answering questions, but it does say in the guidance that if they don't want to, they don't have to.
No, that's not the point I think that Mr. Humphreys is making, or if it isn't, I'll add on to it. The question is, it was brought to resolve conflicts of evidence. You told us we had to be very specific with what those were. Is it the case that the Minister added on to the bits that we specifically asked her to do?
The Minister opened up and said more, yeah, absolutely, yes, she did. I think that's something she's allowed to do, and then ultimately then it's for the Chair to decide if there are wider questions then if she goes beyond the original.
It would have been open to members to ask questions about a wide range of issues, and basically anything that she talked about could have been gone.
But the point is, Chair, if you don't mind me saying, no criticism, because of course we give Minister her due, but it might have been better if we were a wee bit more tightly focused on the issues of conflicting information.
That was in the letter.
That was specified.
Very specific,
Oh, yes.
in the letter, and the members had agreed to a specific
I
word.
suppose one of the issues, it says the committee wishes to seek clarification from you regarding whether or not you were aware that emergency exiting plans proposed, but that, and then evidence to the committee on her evidence. It's all about the very focused issues about conflicting evidence, very much that. She decided to speak more extensively and expansively on other things. And do any further written evidence. One assumes that a person coming to give evidence will answer questions.
Could I also ask, just, I know we're at the very end of the mandate and therefore it may or may not be relevant, but frequently we get statements read out. If there is a formal statement, it would be handy if they would give us the statement beforehand. It doesn't prejudge, or even that we can sit and read at the time, because when we get speeches that last over an hour and a half, it's just very hard to follow. And maybe, I'm not saying that people have to give us a written brief, but if they are going to have one, it would facilitate us in understanding what they're trying to say.
If a thing is a 5-minute presentation, that's fine, you can remember that, but I ended up, Mr. Humphrey said he had 3 pages of questions, I think it was. Most of us, I'm sure, filled pages with points that we wanted to go back on.
So just for the people coming forward, if we just add it as a request, if they are going to speak from a note, even if they just give it to the clerk when they arrive, it just means that you're reading through what they're saying. It's just easier to follow.
It does generally happen that people have given them, but I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. Next meeting is on Tuesday the 8th in the Senate chamber at 10. Arts Council and I will provide an update on transfer of functions. Rosie Flanagan will brief on the Casement Park inquiry pending a confirmation. Which will I have. Thank you. Adjourn meeting, please.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is